The champagne glass shattered. Dominic Kaffee watched the crystal explode against the marble floor 6 inches from his worn work boots, golden liquid spreading across polished stone like a judgment. The ballroom fell silent. 200 people in tuxedos and evening gowns turning as one, their conversation dying mid-sentence. "Did I say you could stand there?" Jordan Ripley's voice cut through the silence, sharp enough to draw blood. The CEO of Meridian Technologies stood at the center of the room in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, his hands still raised from throwing the glass, his expression twisted with something that looked like pleasure. Dominic didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there holding his gray janitor's cart, the mop bucket gleaming under the chandelier light. "Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, you've just walked into something powerful. I can already feel this story is going to shake something loose in your spirit. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Haven't subscribed yet? Hit that button now, because we're about to go on a journey and you're going to want to see how this ends. Trust me on that. Now, let me tell you what happened next. I asked you a question. Jordan took 3 steps forward, his Italian leather shoes clicking against marble. "Are you deaf as well as stupid?" The crowd shifted. Someone laughed, a nervous, uncertain sound that died quickly. A woman in emerald silk touched her husband's arm, her face uncomfortable. But no one spoke. No one moved to intervene. Dominic met Jordan's eyes. "I'm cleaning up the spill by the East Terrace, sir. Just passing through." Passing through. Jordan repeated the words like they tasted foul. He turned his audience, arms spread wide. "Did you hear that? Just passing through. Tell me something." He spun back to Dominic. "Do you know what this event cost per plate?" "No, sir. $20,000. Jordan's smile was all teeth, no warmth. $20,000 for each person in this room to celebrate Meridian's acquisition of coal. He caught himself. Of Patterson Industries. The biggest deal in tech this quarter. And you think you can just pass through? With your mop and your bucket and your... His eyes traveled down Dominic's frame with undisguised contempt. "Your Goodwill clothes?" Dominic's uniform was clean. Pressed even. He made sure of that every morning at 4 a.m. before his shift started. But it was old, faded from countless washes, the knees slightly threadbare. Next to the opulence surrounding them, he looked exactly like what he was supposed to be. Invisible, beneath notice. "Poor. I apologize for the intrusion," Dominic said quietly. "I'll use the service hallway." "No." The word cracked like a whip. Jordan closed the distance between them, so close Dominic could smell his cologne, something woody and expensive, probably Italian. "You're already here. You've already interrupted my celebration. So let's make it educational, shall we?" The room's energy shifted. This wasn't just discomfort anymore. This was danger, the kind that came when someone with power decided to use it as a weapon. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jordan announced, one hand landing on Dominic's shoulder with proprietary force. "Let me share something my father taught me. He built this company from nothing. Started in a garage, worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed everything. You know what he used to say?" No one answered. The silence had weight now, pressing down like atmosphere before a storm. He said there are 2 types of people in this world. Those who build empires and those who clean up after them. Jordan's fingers tightened on Dominic's shoulder. "And the difference isn't luck or circumstance," or his voice dripped with mockery, systemic inequality. "It's drive, intelligence, the willingness to do whatever it takes to win." A muscle jumped in Dominic's jaw. Just once. So slight that only someone watching closely would catch it. Jordan caught it. "Oh, did that upset you?" He leaned in, voice dropping to a stage whisper that carried perfectly across the silent room. "Let me guess. You think you're just as smart as me, just as capable. You just never got the chances I got, right? If only someone had given you a scholarship, a loan, a helping hand." "Jordan," a woman's voice, sharp with warning. She emerged from the crowd. Late 30s, dark hair swept up in an elegant twist, wearing a midnight blue gown that whispered money but somehow didn't scream it. Her eyes found Dominic's for just a moment, and something flickered there. Recognition? Sympathy? That's enough. "Is it Vera?" Jordan didn't even look at her. I'm just having conversation with our staff. Nothing wrong with that, is there? Vera Tully. Dominic knew her name because he'd made it his business to learn everyone's name over the past 6 months. Vice President of Innovation. MIT graduate. Self-made. One of the few executives who actually said please and thank you to cleaning staff. She was also, according to office gossip, the woman Jordan wanted but couldn't have. A conversation requires 2 willing participants, Vera said coolly. What you're doing is... What I'm doing, Jordan interrupted, his voice hardening, is running my company. In my building. At my event. And if I want to have a discussion about the value of hard work with someone who clearly doesn't understand the concept, that's my prerogative. He turned back to Dominic, and now the mask was fully off. The polished CEO vanished, replaced by something uglier, something that had probably always been there, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. Here's the truth, friend. The word friend twisted into something obscene. You're 45 years old. 38, Dominic corrected softly. Whatever. You're pushing middle age, and you're pushing a mop. You know why? Because at every crucial moment in your life, you made the easy choice. Didn't study hard enough. Didn't work smart enough. Probably blamed everyone else for your failures. Jordan's smile widened. And now you're here, in my building, wearing that pathetic uniform, and you're exactly where you deserve to be. The words landed like physical blows. Dominic felt them, not because they were true, but because he'd heard variations of them his entire life. From teachers who assumed he was in remedial classes, from store security who followed him through aisles, from police who asked for ID when he sat on benches in nice neighborhoods. The assumption of less than. The casual cruelty of those who'd never had to prove their right to exist in spaces they occupied. But he didn't flinch, didn't break eye contact, just stood there with a stillness that was somehow more powerful than any response could be. And that, somehow, made Jordan angrier. Nothing to say. The CEO's face flushed. No defense. No excuses. Would it matter if I had them? Dominic asked. The question hung in the air. Simple. Devastating. Jordan's hand dropped from Dominic's shoulder. For just a second, something flickered across his face. Maybe shame, maybe recognition of how far he'd gone. But then it hardened again into righteous anger. Get out, he said. Use the service entrance like you're supposed to. And if I ever see you in the public spaces of this building again during business hours, you're fired. Dominic nodded once. Slowly, then began to turn his cart toward the service hallway. That's what happened. His movement shifted the collar of his uniform, and something caught the chandelier light. A flash of deep blue and gold, hanging on a simple chain against his collarbone. Jordan's eyes locked onto it. His expression changed. Wait. The word came out strangled. That necklace. Where did you get that? Dominic's hand moved to his chest, fingers brushing the pendant that had been hidden beneath his collar. A lapis lazuli stone set in what appeared to be antique gold, carved with a symbol that might have been a family crest. Simple, elegant, and to anyone who knew what they were looking at, worth more than every piece of jewelry in the room combined. This, Dominic's voice was still quiet, still calm, but something had shifted in it, a note of something that hadn't been there before. It's a family heirloom. That's impossible. Jordan stepped forward, his earlier cruelty replaced by something else now. Confusion. And underneath it, just beginning to bloom, fear. That stone, that setting, I've only ever seen one like it, and it belonged to... He stopped. His face went pale. Around the room, people began to murmur. The ones who recognized what they were seeing. The ones who understood that a janitor wearing a $15 million heirloom meant something was very, very wrong with their understanding of reality. Dominic met Jordan's eyes one more time, and this time he smiled. Tell me, Mr. Ripley, he said softly, in your father's wisdom about the 2 types of people in the world, did he ever mention a 3rd type? Jordan's mouth opened. No sound came out. The type who have already built empires, Dominic continued, his hand still resting on the pendant, but choose to see how people treat those who clean up after them. The champagne glass had shattered 6 minutes ago. In 6 more minutes, Jordan Ripley's entire world would follow. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. 4. 5. Then Vera Tully laughed, a short, sharp sound that cut through the tension like a knife through silk. "Oh my God," she said, her hand rising to cover her mouth. "Oh my God, Jordan, you didn't." But Jordan wasn't listening. His eyes were still fixed on the pendant, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to name: shock, disbelief, horror, and finally, a desperate kind of denial. "No," he said. "No. You bought that somewhere. A pawn shop. A replica. There's no way you." "The Ashford crest," came a voice from the crowd. An elderly man in a pristine tuxedo stepped forward, his white hair gleaming under the chandeliers. Richard Morcerf, chairman of Meridian's board of directors. His eyes were sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Egyptian lapis lazuli, Byzantine gold work, commissioned in 1887 by Theodore Ashford for his eldest son, one of 3 in existence. He looked at Dominic with something approaching awe. "The other 2 are in museums. Unless," Vera said slowly, pieces clicking together in her brilliant mind, "your family." Dominic's smile didn't waver, but something in his eyes softened when he looked at her. "My grandmother gave it to me when I was 12. She said it was to remind me of who I was, no matter what I wore or where I stood." "Ashford," Jordan repeated, his voice hollow. Then, louder, desperate, "You're lying. The Ashford family sold their holdings in the 90s. They're gone. Dissolved." "Most of the holdings, yes," Dominic agreed. He made no move to leave now. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that it felt like the room had tilted on its axis. Sold to various venture capital firms, hedge funds, private equity groups. "My uncle Theodore, named for the founder, he believed in diversification, in being invisible." He let that last word land with precision. "As for dissolved," Dominic continued, "the Ashford Trust still controls significant stakes in 47 major corporations across 6 industries. We just prefer not to advertise. My family learned a long time ago that the most effective power is the kind people don't see coming." Richard Morcerf's face had gone very still. 47 corporations, he repeated. "That would include Meridian Technologies, yes." Dominic's eyes never left Jordan's. "We hold approximately 18%. Not enough for a controlling interest, but enough to matter. Enough to have a voice in major decisions. Appointments. Acquisitions." The word acquisitions hit Jordan like a physical blow. The Patterson deal. His triumph. The whole reason for tonight's celebration. "The board approved that deal," Jordan said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Unanimous vote. Subject to final approval from all major stakeholders," Richard Morcerf said quietly. "Which includes the Ashford Trust." He looked at Dominic with new understanding. "You've been here for 6 months. 7, actually." Dominic released the pendant, letting it rest against his chest. Visible now, impossible to ignore. "I started in March. Overnight shift at first, then moved to days in May." "Why?" The question came from Vera, and unlike Jordan's accusations, it held genuine curiosity. "Why work as a janitor in a building your family partially owns?" For the first time, real emotion flickered across Dominic's face. Something old and weary and sad. "My grandmother died 2 years ago," he said. "She was 93, sharp as a blade until the very end. Before she passed, she told me something that kept me awake at night." He paused, his jaw tightening. "She said she was worried the money had poisoned us, that we'd become so insulated from real people, real struggle, that we'd lost our humanity. She asked me to prove her wrong. The ballroom had become a confessional. 200 people listening to something raw and true. So I went looking," Dominic continued. "Applied to companies where my family held investments. No references, no credentials beyond a GED, which I actually do have, by the way, along with degrees from Howard and Wharton, but that's beside the point. I wanted to see how people treated someone they perceived as powerless, someone they could ignore or abuse without consequence." His eyes swept the room, and several people had the grace to look away. "Most places, I found decent people," he said. "Managers who were fair, co-workers who were kind, the occasional jerk, but nothing systematic, nothing cultural." His gaze returned to Jordan. "But here at Meridian, I found something different. I found a rot that starts at the top and seeps down through every level. That's not fair, Jordan protested, but his voice was weak. I built this company's value by 40% in 3 years. Stock price tripled. We're the industry leader in creating shareholder value while treating human beings like disposal assets, Dominic interrupted. I've watched you fire a single mother for being 10 minutes late when her childcare fell through. Seen you mock the IT team for their accents. Heard you tell your assistant that she should smile more if she wants to advance her career. His voice hardened. And tonight, you decided to publicly humiliate someone for the crime of being poor in your presence. Jordan's face flushed red. I've worked for everything I have. My father started with nothing. Your father started with a $2 million loan from his father-in-law and called it nothing because he had to pay it back, Vera said flatly. She'd moved to stand slightly apart from the crowd now, her arms crossed, her expression disgusted. I've heard the story, Jordan. We all have. You've told it at every company meeting for 3 years, conveniently leaving out the part about the loan, the family connections that got you early contracts, the prep school education. If you're watching this and you're feeling something right now, anger, validation, that recognition of times you've been underestimated or dismissed, leave a comment. Tell me your story. This community is built on people who know that respect isn't about what's in your bank account. Hit subscribe if you believe character matters more than credentials, because we're just getting started. Jordan turned on Vera like a wounded animal. You're really going to lecture me? You, who've been trying to undermine my authority since the day I promoted you. You didn't promote me, Vera said coldly. The board promoted me over your objections. Because unlike you, I actually earned my position through competence, not inheritance and cruelty. Careful, Jordan warned. I can make your life very difficult here. Can you? Vera's smile was sharp. Because I'm starting to think the power structure you've been taking for granted is about to shift dramatically. All eyes turned back to Dominic. He'd been watching the exchange with interest, his expression unreadable. Now he stepped forward, leaving his janitor's cart behind, a symbolic gesture that didn't go unnoticed. I came here to understand something, Dominic said. My grandmother's fear that wealth inevitably corrupts. I wanted to know if it was true, if power and money always turn people into. He gestured at Jordan. This. And what did you conclude? Richard Morcerf asked. That she was half right. Dominic looked at Vera. Money doesn't corrupt everyone. I've watched Miss Tully stay late to mentor junior employees. Seen her fight for better benefits for hourly workers. Witnessed her kill deals that would have been profitable but ethically questionable. He turned back to Jordan. But I've also seen what happens when someone mistakes wealth for worth. When they believe their bank balance is a moral scorecard, and anyone with less must have earned less. So what now? Jordan's voice cracked slightly. You're going to what? Fire me? Destroy my company because I hurt your feelings? Your company, Dominic repeated softly. That's interesting phrasing. See, I've spent 7 months watching you run Meridian like your personal kingdom. Making decisions without board consultation. Pursuing acquisitions that benefit your ego more than shareholder value. Creating a workplace culture so toxic that your turnover rate in the past year is 43%. Richard Morcerf's eyebrows rose. I wasn't aware it was that high. Because Jordan's been classifying terminations as voluntary resignations and mutual departures, Dominic said. I've read the exit interviews. The real ones, not the sanitized versions presented to the board. People are fleeing this place like it's on fire. You've been spying, Jordan accused. That's illegal. I've been cleaning, Dominic corrected. You'd be amazed what gets left on desks, in trash cans, in unlocked filing cabinets. No one notices the janitor. No one guards their words or their documents when someone invisible is emptying their trash. His smile held no warmth. You taught me that tonight. The powerless are beneath notice, right? Just part of the furniture. The trap had been so perfectly laid that Jordan had walked into it with his eyes open, baited by his own arrogance. The Patterson acquisition, Richard said slowly. You have concerns. I have questions, Dominic replied. About due diligence that seems rushed. About projections that feel optimistic. About the fact that Jordan is paying 40% above market value for a company whose primary asset is a patent that expires in 14 months. Jordan's face went from red to white. That patent is renewable. It's being challenged in 3 different courts, Dominic said, which you know because it's in the filings. But somehow that information didn't make it into your presentation to the board. You painted Patterson as a long-term strategic asset when really it's a gamble that could bankrupt Meridian if it goes wrong. The silence that followed was absolute. Richard Morcerf removed his glasses, cleaning them with a handkerchief from his pocket, a gesture that seemed more about buying time to think than actual necessity. These are serious allegations. They're easily verified, Dominic said. I have documentation. Records. Emails that Jordan probably thought were deleted, but actually live on the server for 7 years per company policy. He paused. I've been thorough. Of course you have, Vera murmured, and there was something like admiration in her voice. 7 months. You spent 7 months building a case. Dominic met her eyes, and for the first time, something warm flickered in his expression. I want to be sure. My grandmother always said that if you're going to make an accusation, make certain you can back it with evidence. Anything less is just gossip. Your grandmother sounds like she was a remarkable woman, Vera said. She was. Grief flashed across Dominic's face, raw and real. She believed in second chances, too, in redemption. She would want me to be fair, even now. He turned back to Jordan, and the CEO looked small suddenly, diminished not by the revelation of Dominic's identity, but by the weight of his own actions coming home to roost. So here's what's going to happen, Dominic said quietly. Tomorrow morning, the board will receive a full report of my findings. They'll review the Patterson acquisition with the information they should have had from the beginning, and they'll make a decision about whether you're the right person to lead this company forward. You're going to destroy me, Jordan said flatly. No, Dominic replied. I'm going to let you face the consequences of your own choices. There's a difference. He picked up his janitor's cart. That simple gesture, somehow profound in the moment. I'll finish my shift, he told Richard Morcerf. Then tomorrow, we'll talk as stakeholders rather than janitor and board member. He began pushing the cart toward the service hallway, then paused. Oh, and Jordan, you were wrong about one thing. Jordan looked up, his expression hollow. My uniform, Dominic said. It's not from Goodwill. It's custom-made from the same tailor who does my suits. I had them create something that would wear authentically, look appropriately humble. Cost about $3,000. His smile was sad. Even in pretending to be poor, I couldn't escape my privilege completely. That what my grandmother was trying to teach me. That no matter how much I wanted to understand, I could always walk away from this. The people who actually live it don't have that choice. He left then, the soft squeak of his cart wheels the only sound in the silent ballroom. Vera watched him go, something complex working in her expression. And Jordan Ripley stood in the center of his celebration, surrounded by 200 witnesses, and realized that the empire he'd thought was his had never really belonged to him at all. Dominic made it exactly 40 feet down the service corridor before he heard the click of heels on concrete behind him. Wait. He stopped, his hands still on the cart, and took a slow breath before turning. Vera Tully stood in the harsh fluorescent light of the corridor, her midnight blue gown looking surreal against the industrial gray walls. She'd kicked off her heels and was holding them in one hand, her carefully styled hair already starting to come loose. She looked more real than anyone at that party. Ms. Tully, he said carefully, the bathroom is back the other. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't do that. Don't slip back into the role now that you've already blown it up. He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Force of habit. 7 months of yes, ma'am, and right away, sir, is hard to shake. I bet. She moved closer, her bare feet silent on the concrete. In the unforgiving light, he could see the fatigue around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. This was a woman who carried weight. Not just tonight's drama, but something older and heavier. How much of it was an act? The janitor part? Dominic considered the question. Less than you'd think. I actually did the work. Cleaned the bathrooms, emptied the trash, mopped the floors. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. That's not what I meant. Vera leaned against the wall, her eyes never leaving his face. The personality, the quiet submission. The way you let Jordan tear into you without fighting back. How much of that was Dominic the janitor, and how much was just you? It was a perceptive question. Dangerously so. My grandmother used to say that humility and humiliation aren't the same thing, Dominic said. One is a choice, the other is an assault. I chose to be humble. Jordan chose to humiliate. The difference matters. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. They stood in silence for a moment, the muffled sound of the party resuming in the distance. Quieter now, shocked conversations replacing champagne laughter. Why did you defend me? Dominic asked. In there, you were the only one who spoke up. Vera's laugh was bitter. You mean besides the obvious moral imperative of not letting someone be publicly degraded? She shook her head. I'm used to being the only one speaking up. It's practically my job description at this point. Lonely position. You have no idea. She looked away, something vulnerable flickering across her features. 3 years at Meridian. 3 years of being the diversity hire that nobody wanted but the board insisted on. 3 years of Jordan undermining every initiative I propose, every person I try to promote, every ethical standard I try to implement. Her voice dropped. 3 years of wondering if I'm actually making a difference or just providing cover for a company that doesn't actually want to change. There it was, the thing Dominic had seen in her over his months of observation. Vera Tully wasn't just competent or ethical. She was exhausted. Fighting a war she wasn't sure she could win. You make a difference, he said quietly. Sarah Cole, in accounting, the single mother Jordan fired. You got her a severance package 3 times the standard amount. You couldn't save her job, but you fought for her anyway. Vera's eyes widened. How do you know about that? That negotiation was private. Sarah cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes after the meeting, Dominic said. Kept saying she actually fought for me over and over. I was emptying the trash. She didn't notice me, but I heard her. And I saw her face, devastated about losing the job, but shocked that someone in power had actually tried to protect her. Something shifted in Vera's expression. You really were paying attention to everything. Everything, Dominic confirmed. Including the times you stayed until midnight helping Miguel in IT debug code that wasn't your responsibility. The way you remember the names of everyone's kids. How you always say thank you to the security guards and the receptionists, and, he smiled slightly, the janitors. That's just basic human decency, which is surprisingly rare in buildings like this. Dominic paused. You asked how much of what you saw tonight was an act. Can I ask you the same question? What do you mean? The Ice Queen persona. The perfect composure. The way you keep everyone at arm's length. His voice was gentle but precise. How much of that is protection, and how much is isolation? Vera's breath caught. For a moment, her careful mask cracked, and he saw something raw underneath. Loneliness and determination and a desperate kind of hope that she was trying very hard to suppress. You don't get to do that, she said, but there was no heat in it. You don't get to psychoanalyze me after knowing me for 7 months. As the janitor, I was decent too. You're right, Dominic acknowledged. I'm sorry. That was presumptuous. It was also accurate, Vera admitted. She closed her eyes briefly. God, I sound pathetic. The career woman who sacrificed her personal life for professional success and now wonders if it was worth it. It's such a cliché. Or it's the reality of trying to maintain integrity in a system designed to reward the opposite. Dominic stepped away from his card, closing some of the distance between them. There's nothing pathetic about being tired from fighting battles that should never have to be fought. Vera opened her eyes, and there was something dangerous in her gaze now. Something that looked like the beginning of hope or attraction or both. Why are you really here, Dominic Ashford, she asked. And don't give me the line about proving your grandmother wrong. Nobody spends 7 months mopping floors just to make a philosophical point. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight it hadn't before. My father died when I was 16, he said. Heart attack in his office, surrounded by stock tickers and quarterly reports, and absolutely no one who actually cared whether he lived or died. He was 52 years old and had spent every day of his adult life building wealth he never had time to enjoy. My mother found him. She said, his voice roughened. She said he looked surprised, like he'd been sure there would be more time. Vera's expression softened. I promised myself I wouldn't become that, Dominic continued. Wouldn't let the money become more important than the people. But it's so easy to slip into those patterns. To start seeing human beings as resources, problems, obstacles. My grandmother's challenge, it wasn't just about proving her wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could still see people. Really see them. That I hadn't already become my father. And, Vera asked softly, did you prove it? I don't know, Dominic admitted. But I learned something I didn't expect. What's that? That the people worth seeing are the ones who see you back. He held her gaze. You looked at me, the janitor version of me, and you saw a human being, not because you knew who I really was, but because that's who you are. That's rare, Vera. Rare enough that when I compile my report for the board tomorrow, I'm going to recommend something that's going to complicate both our lives considerably. Her pulse jumped visibly at her throat. What recommendation? That you replace Jordan as CEO? The words hung in the air like a detonation. Vera stared at him, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Finally, you're insane. I'm 36 years old. I've been VP for 3 years. The board would never. The board will do what the Ashford Trust recommends, Dominic said. And I'm recommending you. You have the vision, the ethics, the competence. You understand both the technology and the people. You're exactly what Meridian needs, or what you think it needs based on 7 months of observation while pretending to be someone you're not. Vera's voice sharpened, but he could hear the fear underneath. You don't actually know me, Dominic. You know a performance, just like I knew Janitor you. Maybe, he conceded, but I know how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. And that tells me more about character than any resume ever could. Before Vera could respond, the service door burst open. Richard Morcerf stood there, his expression grim, his phone in his hand. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Jordan just sent an email to the entire board. He's claiming you've been engaged in corporate espionage, that your investigation was unauthorized access to privileged information, and that the Ashford Trust's attempt to influence company operations is a violation of shareholder agreements. Dominic's jaw tightened. He's trying to delegitimize anything I report before I can report it. It's worse than that. Richard's face was pale. He's filed an emergency injunction to block the Patterson acquisition review. Claims that any delay will violate the terms of the deal and expose Meridian to a $100 million penalty clause. What penalty clause? Vera demanded. I review that contract. There is now, Richard interrupted. Signed addendum, dated 3 days ago. Jordan has signatory authority for deals under $50 million. He exercised it to add terms that require closing within 72 hours of board approval or Meridian pays liquidated damages. The implications crashed over them like a wave. He trapped us, Dominic said slowly. If we review the deal, we trigger the penalty. If we don't review it and it goes bad, Meridian could collapse. Either way, he's positioned himself as the only one who can save the company. And positioned you as the reckless heir playing games with other people's livelihoods, Richard added grimly. His email is very carefully worded. Makes you sound like a dilettante treating a Fortune 500 company like a social experiment. Jesus. Vera pressed her hands to her temples. He's smarter than I gave him credit for. No, Dominic said. He's more desperate. Smart would be accepting defeat gracefully. This is a man with everything to lose making a panic move. A panic move with teeth, Richard pointed out. The injunction hearing is tomorrow morning at 8. If Jordan gets it approved, your investigation is dead in the water, and the Patterson deal closes automatically. Dominic looked at Vera. You know that contract better than anyone. Is there a way out? Maybe, she said slowly. If I can prove that the addendum was signed fraudulently, that Jordan exceeded his authority or misrepresented material facts, the whole thing could be voided. But I need access to the original files, the negotiation records, probably Patterson's internal communications, which are all in Jordan's office, Richard finished, which is locked, and which Jordan has undoubtedly secured by now. Not necessarily, Dominic said. A slow smile spread across his face. See, there's one benefit to being the janitor that no one notices. Vera's eyes widened. You have keys. I have keys to everything. He pulled a lanyard from his pocket, a dozen keys jangling. Master access. Building security gave it to me in April when I volunteered to handle the executive floor cleaning. That's breaking and entering, Richard warned. It's entering, Dominic corrected. I'm authorized to be in that office. The fact that I'm looking for specific documents rather than just emptying trash, well, that's a matter of interpretation. It's also exactly the kind of corporate espionage Jordan is accusing you of, Vera said. But her eyes are bright now, calculating. If we get caught, he buries us. So we don't get caught. Dominic met her gaze. Question is, are you willing to risk everything on a hunch? Your reputation, your career, maybe your freedom if Jordan pushes criminal charges. Vera didn't hesitate. If that deal goes through and it's half as bad as you think, Meridian dies and 3,000 people lose their jobs. My reputation isn't worth that. She straightened, and something fierce and beautiful came over her face. Let's go raid his office. Richard sighed. If anyone asks, I was never part of this conversation. Smart man, Dominic said. He looked at Vera, really looked at her. This woman in an evening gown, barefoot in a service corridor, ready to commit potential crimes to save a company that had never fully valued her. Last chance to walk away. I've been walking away from fights my whole life, Vera said. Choosing my battles, being strategic, playing the long game. You know what it's gotten me? A corner office and absolutely no one to share with. She smiled, and it was equal parts sad and defiant. Maybe it's time to stop being smart and start being right. And there, in that moment, Dominic Ashford felt something shift in his chest. Something that had nothing to do with corporate intrigue or family legacies or proving points about humanity. He realized with a mixture of exhilaration and terror, in serious danger of falling for this woman. Okay then, he said, try to keep his voice steady. Let's go commit some light felonies. They left the service corridor together, the janitor and the VP, heading toward an office that held either their salvation or their destruction. Behind them, Richard Morsurf watched them go and pulled out his phone. This is going to end in disaster, he muttered. But he was smiling when he said it. The executive floor at midnight was a different world. Dominic had cleaned these halls dozens of times, but always with the overhead fluorescents blazing, always with the hum of distant voices and ringing phones. Now, with only emergency lighting casting long shadows across polished marble, the space felt like a cathedral, beautiful, silent, and slightly ominous. I've worked here for 3 years, Vera whispered, following close behind him. Why does it feel like we're trespassing? Because we kind of are, Dominic replied, his keys quiet in his hand. They'd changed. He'd ditched the janitor's uniform for slacks and a button-down he kept in his locker, and Vera had borrowed a spare set of professional clothes from her office. The evening gown was too memorable, too traceable. She looked good in simple black pants and a white blouse. Better than good, actually. The formal where had been armor. This was just her. Jordan's office is at the end, Vera said, pointing. Corner suite, southern exposure, private elevator, all the trappings of power he thinks he earned. There was an edge to her voice that made Dominic glance back. History there. Isn't there always? She sighed. When I was first promoted to VP, Jordan asked me to dinner. Said we should get to know each other better. I declined professionally. He asked twice more, each time a little less professional. The third time, I told him explicitly that I wasn't interested in mixing business and pleasure. Let me guess, Dominic said, his jaw tight. He made your life hell after that. Nothing I could prove. Nothing overt. Just projects reassigned, budgets questioned, my recommendations to the board somehow never making it onto the agenda. She laughed without humor. The death of 1,000 cuts. HR calls it a personality conflict. Dominic stopped walking, turned to face her fully. I'm sorry that happened to you. You didn't do it. No, but I'm sorry that the world is still a place where it happens at all. He held her gaze. For what it's worth, if I get my way tomorrow, you'll never have to deal with him again. Something complicated flickered across Vera's face. About that, your recommendation. We should talk about. Later, Dominic interrupted gently. After we either save the company or destroy our careers. Deal. She nodded, but he could see the anxiety in her eyes. The weight of possibility, of suddenly being offered something she'd wanted but never thought she could have. They reached Jordan's office. Dominic tried 3 keys before finding the right one, the lock turning with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet. The door swung open. Jordan Ripley's office was exactly what Dominic had expected, ostentatious without being tasteful. A massive desk of dark wood dominated the space, flanked by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city lights. Original art on the walls, probably expensive, definitely soulless. Photos of Jordan with various politicians and celebrities, each one positioned to imply influence and importance. No pictures of friends, Vera observed quietly. Or family, just power brokers and photo ops. Lonely at the top, Dominic murmured. Except he climbed there by stepping on everyone beneath him, so it's loneliness of his own making. They moved quickly, Vera heading for the desk, while Dominic checked the filing cabinets. Everything was locked, but his master key opened the desk drawers easily. Here, Vera said, pulling out a thick folder. Patterson Industries. Original contract negotiations. She flipped through pages, her finger tracing lines of dense legal text. Her eyes widened. Oh, Jordan, you idiot. What? The penalty clause addendum. It's here, signed 3 days ago like Richard said. But look at the authorization. She turned the document toward Dominic. Jordan's signatory authority is for deals under $50 million in total value. The Patterson acquisition is $48 million purchase price, but there are assumption of liabilities clauses that bring the total exposure to $62 million. Dominic leaned in to read, very aware of how close they were standing. How he could smell her perfume, something subtle and warm. How her shoulder brushed his as she pointed to specific passages. Focus, he told himself. So he exceeded his authority, Dominic said. The addendum is invalid. Maybe, probably. But to prove it, we need to show that Jordan knew about the full liability exposure when he signed. Otherwise, he can claim it was an honest mistake, and the addendum still stands. What kind of liabilities are we talking about? Vera flipped to another page, scanning quickly. Environmental cleanup at Patterson's manufacturing facility. Pending litigation from a workplace injury. Outstanding vendor debts that weren't disclosed in the initial due diligence. She looked up. This is bad, Dominic. Even without the penalty clause, this deal could sink Meridian. But Jordan knew about it. He had to. These aren't hidden. They're in the public filings, the discovery documents. She pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. If I can cross-reference the dates, show that Jordan accessed these documents before he signed the addendum, then we prove he knew he was exceeding his authority, Dominic finished. And the whole thing collapses. In theory. Vera's face was tight with concentration. But I need access to Jordan's email server, his calendar, his document access logs. That's all password protected. Dominic moved to the computer on Jordan's desk. Touch the mouse. The screen lit up, showing a password prompt. Any ideas? He asked. Could be anything. Could take hours to. Dominic typed, Meridian 1. The screen unlocked. Vera stared. How did you possibly? I clean his office, Dominic said. Every password hint he's ever written down, every post-it note he's thrown away, every muttered curse when he had to reset something. After 7 months, you learn patterns. He smiled slightly. Also, his ego is massive. Of course, his password is just the company name with a 1 at the end. That's actually impressive detective work, Vera said, moving beside him. Okay, let me drive. I know where to look. Her fingers replaced his on the keyboard, pulling up email archives, searching for specific terms. Dominic watched her work, fascinated by her focus. This was a woman in her element, brilliant mind engaged, ethical fury channeled into precise action. There, she said triumphantly. Email from Patterson's CFO dated 5 days ago, explicitly listing the environmental liabilities. Jordan replied, acknowledging receipt and asking about strategies to minimize disclosure. That's consciousness of guilt, Dominic said. It's enough to question his judgment at minimum. Vera kept digging. And here, document access logs showing he reviewed the full liability analysis 2 days before signing the addendum. He knew exactly what he was doing. So why do it? Dominic asked. Why sign an addendum that could destroy the company? Vera went very still. Because he doesn't think it will destroy the company. He thinks it will destroy his opposition. She pulled up another email chain. This one between Jordan and someone named Vincent Corleone. Who's Corleone? Dominic asked. Patterson's majority shareholder. Vera's voice was tight. And Jordan's former roommate from business school. They've stayed in touch over the years. I always wondered if this acquisition was more personal favor than business strategy. The emails painted a damning picture. Jordan and Vincent discussing making sure the deal closes and managing the downside risk. References to alternative plans and secondary buyers. Oh God, Vera whispered. This isn't just negligence. It's fraud. Explain. Jordan knows the deal is bad for Meridian, but it's great for Patterson. Gets them acquired at an inflated price, transfers all their liabilities to us. And look at this. She pointed to an email from 3 weeks ago. Vincent is promising Jordan a consulting fee of $2 million once the deal closes. He's getting a kickback, Dominic said, anger rising in his chest. He's deliberately sabotaging his own company for a payout from his friend. And the penalty clause ensures that even if someone tries to stop it, the cost of backing out is so high that the board will approve the deal anyway. It's brilliant in the most evil way possible. If this is hitting you hard, if you're watching this and thinking about all the times the system seemed rigged against regular people while the powerful took care of each other, drop a comment. Tell me you see it too. And subscribe if you want to see how this ends, because I promise you, justice is coming. Vera was downloading files frantically now, copying emails to a secure cloud drive. This is enough. More than enough. We can bury him with this. Assuming we get out of here without. The elevator chimed. They froze, eyes locking in mutual panic. The executive floor elevator required key card access. Someone with authority was coming up. Lights, Vera hissed. Dominic moved fast, shutting down the computer monitor, killing the desk lamp. They ducked behind a massive desk just as they heard footsteps in the hallway. The footsteps stopped right outside Jordan's office. In the darkness beneath the desk, pressed close together, Dominic could feel Vera's heart racing. Or maybe that was his own. Hard to tell when they were this close, when adrenaline was singing through his veins and her hand had found his in the dark. The door handle rattled. Then a voice, not Jordan's, thankfully. Building security. Executive floor secure, the guard said, presumably into a radio. All offices locked. No signs of disturbance. A pause. Then, yeah, I heard about the drama at the party. Rich people problems, right? A laugh. Okay, heading back down. Night shift is going to be boring after this. The footsteps retreated. The elevator chimed again. Silence. Dominic and Vera stayed frozen for another 30 seconds, then slowly emerged from their hiding spot. In the dim emergency lighting, he could see her face, flushed, excited, terrified. That was too close, she breathed. Yeah. He realized he was still holding her hand. She realized it at the same moment. Neither of them let go. Dominic, Vera said softly, when this is over, whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know something. What? Tonight. The way you stood there and let Jordan tear into you, knowing you could destroy him at any moment, but choosing to wait, to let him reveal himself. She shook her head. That wasn't weakness. That was the strongest thing I've ever seen. I was just. You were demonstrating the difference between power and strength, she interrupted. Power is what Jordan has, the ability to hurt people from a position of authority. Strength is what you have, the ability to withstand hurt and still choose integrity. Her other hand came up to his chest, right where the necklace rested beneath his shirt. Your grandmother would be proud of you, Vera said. I hope so. His voice came out rougher than intended. Vera, his phone buzzed. They both jumped. A text from Richard Morcerf. Jordan just filed a second motion. He's requesting an emergency board meeting at 6 a.m. to ratify the Patterson deal before the injunction hearing. Says he has evidence of coordinated interference by hostile parties. He's moving faster than we thought. 6 a.m. Vera said, reading over his shoulder. That's 5 hours from now. 5 hours to build our case, Dominic said. 5 hours to make sure we have every piece of evidence locked down and verified. 5 hours to decide if we're really ready to go to war with a man who's already shown he'll do anything to win. Vera's eyes met his. Are we sure about this? Once we present this evidence, there's no taking it back. Jordan will come after us with everything he has. Dominic thought about his grandmother, about his father dying alone in an office, about Sarah Cole crying in a bathroom because someone had actually fought for her, about 7 months of watching good people suffer under bad leadership. He thought about Vera, brilliant, ethical, exhausted Vera, who deserved better than a career spent fighting battles she shouldn't have to fight. I'm sure, he said. Question is, are you with me? Vera smiled then, fierce and beautiful and slightly terrifying. All the way to the end, she said. Let's go burn his empire down. They left Jordan's office hand in hand, carrying evidence that would change everything. Neither of them noticed the small red light blinking in the corner of the ceiling. Jordan's private security camera, motion-activated, recording everything. They made it to Vera's office before Dominic's phone exploded with notifications. Not texts, not calls, email alerts, dozens of them, cascading in so fast his screen became a blur of new messages. What the hell? Vera pulled out her own phone. Her face went pale. Oh no. No. Dominic opened the first email. It was from Jordan, sent to the entire company distribution list. Every employee, every board member, every major shareholder. Subject: security breach, corporate espionage caught on camera. The email was brief, clinical, devastating. At 12:47 a.m., security footage captured 2 individuals unlawfully entering my private office and accessing confidential company files. Despite having authorized building access, neither individual had permission to enter executive offices after hours or to review privileged acquisition documents. The individuals have been identified as Dominic Ashford, posing as janitorial staff for the past 7 months, and Vera Tully, VP of Innovation. I have contacted legal counsel and law enforcement. Criminal charges for corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and computer fraud are being pursued. I have also filed an emergency motion to suspend Ms. Tully's access and authority, pending investigation. The Ashford family's attempted hostile interference in legitimate company business represents a fundamental breach of shareholder trust. I am requesting an immediate board vote to dilute their holdings and remove their influence from Meridian operations. The Patterson acquisition will proceed as scheduled. This company will not be held hostage by criminals, regardless of their family name or previous position. Below the text were attachments. Security camera footage, time-stamped and crystal clear. Dominic and Vera entering Jordan's office, using his computer, downloading files, and one final image that made Dominic's blood run cold. The 2 of them holding hands as they left, faces close, unmistakably intimate. Jordan had captioned it, "Corporate espionage or lover's conspiracy. You decide." He's burying us, Vera whispered. Not just professionally. He's destroying our credibility, our reputations, making everything we found look like a vendetta instead of evidence. Dominic's phone rang. Richard Morcerf. Tell me you have a plan, Richard said without preamble. Because the board is in chaos. Half of them want you arrested. The other half want answers. And Jordan is playing this perfectly. Wounded CEO, protecting his company from infiltrators. The evidence we found, Dominic started. Looks like fruit of the poisonous tree now, Richard interrupted. You obtained it through unauthorized access. Even if it's genuine, any lawyer worth their degree will get it thrown out as illegally acquired. Jordan knows that. He's been 3 steps ahead this entire time. Dominic's mind raced. The camera. I should have thought about the camera. I got sloppy. No. Vera cut in, her voice sharp. You got human. You trusted that 7 months of being invisible meant you understood all the security measures. But Jordan didn't install that camera for security. He installed it for this exact scenario, to catch anyone who came after him. She was right. The camera's angle was too specific, two perfectly positioned to capture the desk and computer. This wasn't about protecting company assets. This was about protecting Jordan's secrets with blackmail insurance. There has to be a way to salvage this, Dominic said. If we release the emails we found, the kickback scheme, the fraudulent authorization, we release stolen emails, we prove Jordan's accusations, Richard said grimly. Right now, this looks like a billionaire heir playing games. If you start leaking confidential documents, it looks like exactly what Jordan says it is, corporate espionage. Vera sank into her office chair, her face in her hands. 3 years. 3 years of playing by the rules, building credibility, doing everything right. And he destroys it all in one email. Dominic moved to her side, crouching so they were eye level. Hey, we're not done yet. There's still... What? She looked up, and there were tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of frustrated rage. What do we have left? He's outmaneuvered us. By the time we could mount a legal defense, the Patterson deal will be closed, he'll have his payout, and we'll be facing criminal charges. The board meeting, Dominic said. 6 a.m. We get in front of them. We tell the truth. They won't let us in, Richard said through the phone. Jordan's requesting that both of you be barred from the meeting as potential security threats. And legally, as a board member myself, I can't argue against that without looking complicit. Dominic stood, pacing. There had to be an angle, something Jordan hadn't anticipated. His grandmother had always said that arrogance was a weakness masquerading as strength. Jordan was arrogant. Where was the weakness? His phone buzzed again. Another email, but this one was different. Private, not company-wide. From an address he didn't recognize. Email protected. Mr. Ashford, we've never met, but I know who you are. More importantly, I know what you found in Jordan Ripley's office tonight, because I'm the one who's been documenting his crimes for the past 18 months. My name is Vincent Corleone. I'm a majority shareholder of Patterson Industries, and I need to meet with you immediately. What Jordan told you in those emails, it's not the whole truth. It's not even close. If you want to stop him, you need to know what really happened to your father. I'll be waiting in the parking garage. Level 3, blue Mercedes. Come alone, or don't come at all. Dominic read the message 3 times, his heart hammering. What is it? Vera asked, reading his expression. He showed her the phone. Watch her eyes widen. It's a trap, she said immediately. It has to be. Jordan's friend. Luring you to a secondary location? This is how people disappear, Dominic. Or it's someone with information we need, Dominic countered. But his gut was screaming the same warning. He mentioned my father, a detail he could have gotten from any public record. Your father's death was in the business news. Vera stood, grabbing his arm. Don't do this. We'll find another way. What other way? Dominic asked quietly. In 5 hours, Jordan wins everything. Our evidence is inadmissible. Our credibility is destroyed. He's backed us into a corner where the only move is surrender. He looked at the email again. Unless this is legitimate. Unless Vincent Corleone has something that changes the game. Or unless he's working with Jordan to eliminate the last threat to their scheme, Vera shot back. God, listen to yourself. Come alone. Or don't come at all. That's textbook serial killer behavior. She's right, Richard said through the phone. This smells wrong, Dominic. Don't go. But Dominic was already moving toward the door. Not because he thought it was safe. Not because he wasn't terrified. But because something in that message had hooked into his chest and wouldn't let go. What really happened to your father? His father had died 16 years ago. Heart attack, the doctors said. Stress and genetics, and terrible luck. Dominic had been 16, devastated, angry at a man who'd chosen work over family and paid for it with his life. But what if there was more to the story? I have to know, he said to Vera. I have to. Then I'm coming with you, she said flatly. The message said. I don't care what the message said. Vera grabbed her jacket. You're not walking into a potential ambush alone. I've already lost my career tonight. I'm not losing you too. The words hung between them. Losing you, carrying weight beyond professional alliance. Dominic should have argued, should have insisted she stay safe. But the truth was, he didn't want to face this alone. And the fact that she was willing to risk everything, even after Jordan had destroyed her reputation, told him something crucial about who Vera Tully really was. Both of you are insane, Richard said. If you're determined to do this, at least let me call someone. Security, police, literally anyone. No, Dominic said. If Corleone is legitimate and we show up with authorities, he'll disappear. We need what he knows. Then at least keep your phone on. Keep me connected. If I hear anything wrong, I'm calling 911 whether you like it or not. Deal, Dominic agreed. They left the office together, riding the elevator down in tense silence. At level 3 of the parking garage, they found the blue Mercedes exactly where the email had promised. Engine running, windows tinted. The passenger door opened. Mr. Ashford, a voice called from inside. And Miss Tully, I see. I should have known you wouldn't follow instructions. Your father never did either. Dominic's breath caught. He approached slowly, Vera close behind him. The man in the driver's seat was probably 60, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing an expensive suit that looked rumpled from long wear. His face was lined with exhaustion and something deeper, guilt, maybe, or fear. You knew my father, Dominic said. I worked for him, Vincent Corleone replied. 20 years ago, I was his VP of acquisitions at Ashford Enterprises. I was there the day he died. His eyes were haunted. And I'm the reason he's dead. The parking garage seemed to tilt. Vera's hand found Dominic's arm, steadying. Explain, Dominic managed. Your father discovered something, Vincent said. A scheme, not unlike what Jordan's running now. Key executives at companies the Ashford Trust invested in, taking kickbacks to inflate acquisition prices. Millions of dollars siphoned from shareholder value into private accounts. Your father was going to expose it, testify to federal regulators, burn down everyone involved. And someone stopped him, Vera said quietly. The heart attack wasn't natural, Vincent confirmed. It was digitalis poisoning. Small doses over weeks, mimicking cardiac symptoms. By the time the attack happened, his system was so compromised that it looked like natural causes. No one investigated too closely. The Ashford family was private, didn't want publicity. The coroner accepted the obvious explanation. Dominic felt like he couldn't breathe. Who? Michael Ripley, Vincent said. Jordan's father. He was the ringleader of the scheme. Your father's death was meant to send a message. Stop investigating, or other Ashfords would suffer the same fate. The world narrowed to this moment, this revelation. Jordan's father had murdered Dominic's. And now Jordan was running the same scheme, the same crimes, protected by the same assumption that wealth meant immunity. You have proof of this, Vera said. Not a question. I have Michael Ripley's records. Communications, financial transfers, the digitalis supplier. I've had them for 16 years hidden because I was a coward. Vincent's voice cracked. I was part of the scheme. Not the murder. I swear I didn't know about that until after, but the financial fraud. When your father died and the investigation died with him, I took my payout and ran. Built Patterson Industries with blood money. And now Jordan wants to acquire Patterson. Dominic said slowly, pieces falling into place. Why? Why would you agree to sell to the son of? Because I didn't agree, Vincent interrupted. Jordan's been blackmailing me. 6 months ago, he found out about my connection to his father's crimes. Threatened to expose everything unless I structured a deal that would benefit him personally. The inflated price, the hidden liabilities, the penalty clauses, all of it designed to look like a legitimate acquisition while actually transferring maximum money to Jordan and maximum risk to Meridian. The kickback, Vera said. The $2 million Jordan's supposed to receive is actually $5 million, Vincent said, plus stock options in a shell company I set up. When Meridian collapses under Patterson's liabilities, and it will, the environmental cleanup alone is a $70 million nightmare. Jordan exercises his options and makes another $20 million shorting Meridian stock. He's not just defrauding the company, Dominic breathed. He's planning to profit from its destruction. Like father, like son, Vincent said bitterly. Except Michael was smarter. Jordan's gotten greedy, sloppy. When I heard about what happened at the gala tonight, I realized he was accelerating his timeline, getting desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. He pulled out a flash drive from his pocket. This contains everything. Michael Ripley's records, Jordan's blackmail communications, the real financial projections for Patterson, proof that Jordan knew about every liability, and hid them intentionally. And he paused. The full toxicology report from your father's death. The one that was buried because the coroner was paid off by Michael Ripley. Dominic's hand shook as he reached for the drive. 16 years of questions. 16 years of wondering if his father's death could have been prevented. And now, proof that it wasn't just preventable, it was murder. Why now? Vera asked, her voice hard with suspicion. You've sat on this for 16 years. Why suddenly grow a conscience? Vincent looked at her directly. Because I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. 6 months if I'm lucky. He smiled without humor. Turns out blood money doesn't buy immortality. And I'd rather spend my last month trying to make this right than meeting my maker with your father's death on my soul. The confession hung in the air, raw and painful. This evidence, Dominic said carefully, it's legitimate, authenticated, would hold up in court. I've had lawyers review it. Investigators verify it. Every document is sourced. Every communication is preserved with metadata. It's airtight. Vincent's expression hardened. But here's the catch. If you release it publicly, you expose my crimes too. I'll spend whatever time I have left in federal prison. I'm willing to accept that. But I need your word that you'll protect my family. My wife, my daughter. I didn't know anything about this. They don't deserve to suffer for my sins. Dominic looked at Vera, saw his own conflict mirrored in her eyes. This was exactly what they needed. Evidence that couldn't be dismissed as illegally obtained, that proved Jordan's crimes beyond question. But it came at a price, destroying a dying man's family. There has to be another way, Vera said. We use the financial evidence, the Patterson fraud, but leave out the parts about Michael Ripley's murder. Claim we obtained it through Vincent's voluntary cooperation as a witness. Jordan will know where it came from, Vincent said. He'll release the blackmail material, expose my role in the original crimes. The murder evidence comes out anyway, just in a way that makes me look like a criminal instead of a witness. You are a criminal, Dominic said quietly. Not cruel, just factual. You helped cover up my father's murder. You took money from the scheme that killed him. You don't get redemption without consequences. I know, Vincent said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to spare my family the shame of what I did. Before Dominic could respond, headlights flooded the parking garage. 3 black SUVs, coming fast from different directions, boxing in the Mercedes. No, Vincent whispered. How did they? The vehicles screeched to a halt, doors flying open. Men in suits emerged, not police, not security. Private contractors, probably hired muscle. And from the lead SUV, Jordan Ripley stepped out, his phone in his hand, his smile triumphant. Did you really think I wouldn't track him? Jordan called across the garage. Vincent's been on a GPS monitor for months. Every move logged. Every communication intercepted. He held up his phone, including the email he sent you 20 minutes ago. Dominic's stomach dropped. They'd walked straight into exactly the trap Vera had warned him about. Here's what's going to happen, Jordan said, walking closer with the confidence of a man who held all the cards. Vincent is going to recant everything he just told you. He's going to confirm that you approached him with bribes to falsify evidence against me. That this whole conspiracy is a desperate attempt by the Ashford family to take over Meridian illegally. I won't, Vincent said, but his voice shook. You will, Jordan said softly. Because if you don't, I won't just expose your crimes. I'll implicate your daughter. Sarah Corleone, age 23, recent business school graduate. I've already seeded documents showing she helped you launder money through Patterson. She'll spend the next decade in federal prison unless you do exactly what I say. You lowly, Vincent breathed. She's innocent. So prove it, Jordan said. Testify that Dominic and Vera try to bribe you. Sign a statement. Do it now, and Sarah never gets mentioned. Refuse, he shrugged. Well, I've already sent the evidence to the FBI, just waiting to see if I need to tell them to proceed. The trap was perfect, diabolical. Jordan had anticipated everything. The security footage, the email intercept, the leverage over Vincent. He'd herded them exactly where he wanted them, and now he was tightening the noose. Dominic looked at Vera, saw the despair in her eyes, looked at Vincent broken and beaten, looked at the flash drive in his hand, evidence that could change everything but only if they could survive the next 5 minutes. And then he heard his grandmother's voice, clear as the day she died. The most dangerous person in any room is the one with nothing left to lose. Jordan thought he'd back them into a corner. But cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. Dominic smiled, slow and certain. "You made a mistake, Jordan," he said. Jordan's confidence flickered. "What? You assumed we came here alone," Dominic said. "You assumed we were stupid enough to walk into this without insurance." He raised his voice, speaking clearly to the phone still connected in his pocket. "Richard, did you get all of that?" Through the phone speaker, Richard Morsurf's voice rang out. Every word. And I wasn't the only one listening. The parking garage's speaker system crackled to life. Suddenly, Jordan's voice echoed from all directions. The conversation they'd just had, recorded and broadcast. "I won't just expose your crimes. I'll implicate your daughter. I've already seeded documents showing she helped you launder money." Jordan's face went white. "What did you?" "Building security has been recording this garage for the past 20 minutes, Dominic said. "On my authority as a major shareholder, I requested emergency surveillance due to suspected criminal activity. Everything you just said, the blackmail, the frame job, the threat to falsify federal evidence, it's all documented now. It was a bluff. Partially. They'd had Richard on the phone, but Dominic had no idea if building security was actually recording. But Jordan didn't know that. And the sudden uncertainty in his eyes said the bluff was working. "You're lying," Jordan said, but his voice wavered. "Am I?" Dominic stepped forward. "Want to bet your freedom on it?" "Because extortion and witness tampering are federal crimes, Jordan. And unlike the corporate espionage you're accusing us of, these charges come with mandatory prison time." The hired muscle looked at each other uncertainly. They'd signed up for intimidation, not accessory to federal crimes. Vera moved beside Dominic, her voice steel. "Here's our counteroffer. You drop the criminal accusations against us. You resign as CEO effective immediately. And you cooperate fully with a board investigation into the Patterson acquisition. In exchange, we don't forward this recording to federal prosecutors. You can't prove. We don't have to prove anything," Dominic interrupted. "We just have to create reasonable doubt about your accusations. And this recording, whether it's legally obtained or not, does that beautifully. Desperate CEO tries to frame investigators who discovered his fraud. That's the headline that destroys you, Jordan. That's the narrative that ends your career even if you never see a courtroom." Jordan stood frozen, his perfect trap collapsing around him. His hired muscle was backing away. His leverage over Vincent was meaningless if using it implicated Jordan in federal crimes. His accusations against Dominic and Vera suddenly looked exactly like what they were, a guilty man attacking his accusers. For the first time all night, Jordan Ripley looked like what he actually was, a spoiled, vicious man who'd finally run out of other people to blame. "This isn't over," he said, but it sounded hollow. "Yes," Dominic said quietly. "It is." Jordan turned and walked back to his SUV. The other vehicles followed, tires squealing as they fled the garage. Silence fell. Then Vincent Corleone started laughing, a harsh, broken sound. "That was insane. You were bluffing about the security recording, weren't you?" "About 70% bluffing," Dominic admitted. But Jordan didn't know that. 30%, Vera corrected. She held up her phone, red recording light visible. "I got video of the whole thing. Not admissible in court probably, but enough for social media. Enough to bury him in public opinion." Vincent shook his head in wonder. "Your father would be proud. He always said the Ashfords were survivors." He pressed the flash drive into Dominic's hand. "Take it. Use it. Make sure my daughter stays safe, and I'll testify to whatever you need." Dominic closed his fingers around the drive. 16 years of answers. The truth about his father's death. The weapon to end Jordan's crimes permanently. "Thank you," he said. Vincent drove away, leaving Dominic and Vera alone in the parking garage. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving exhaustion and the weight of what they'd just survived. "We should go," Vera said. "The board meeting is in 4 hours. We need to prepare, organize the evidence, figure out how to present all of this." Dominic kissed her. "Not planned, not strategic, Just a sudden, overwhelming need to feel something real after so much manipulation and danger. She froze for a heartbeat, then melted into him, her hands fisting his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vera laughed shakily. I'm sorry, Dominic said. I shouldn't have. Don't you dare apologize, she interrupted. I've wanted you to do that since approximately the moment you revealed you weren't actually a janitor. Her smile was tremulous. Maybe before. There was something about the way you carried yourself. Like you were powerful even when everyone assumed you were powerless. Vera, I know, she said. This is complicated. We're in the middle of corporate warfare. Your father was murdered by my CEO's father. We're about to destroy careers and possibly go to prison ourselves, depending on how tomorrow goes. This is literally the worst possible time to start something. Absolutely the worst, Dominic agreed. So we should wait. Be professional. Table this conversation until after the dust settles. Completely agree. Neither of them moved apart. But, Vera whispered, if we're potentially going to prison tomorrow, I'd rather spend tonight with you than alone. Dominic cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. My grandmother used to say that life is what happens while you're making other plans. That waiting for the perfect moment means missing the real one. She sounds like she was very wise. She was, Dominic said, and she'd like you. A lot. This kiss was slower, deeper, full of promise and possibility and the reckless hope of two people who'd found each other in the middle of chaos. When they finally pulled apart, Vera rested her forehead against his. 4 hours until the board meeting. 4 hours to prepare the case that destroys Jordan and possibly saves Meridian. Or, Vera said slowly, 3 hours to prepare the case, and 1 hour to remember that we're human beings who deserve something good, even when the world is falling apart. Dominic smiled against her hair. I like the way you think, Miss Tully. Good, she said, because we're about to bet everything on a play that could either make us heroes or criminals, and I'd like to do it with someone I trust absolutely. You trust me? Dominic asked. Even after I lied about who I was for 7 months? You didn't lie, Vera corrected. You just didn't tell the whole truth. There's a difference. She pulled back to look at him directly. And yes, I trust you. Because when you could have destroyed Jordan the moment he humiliated you, you waited. Because when you could have protected only yourself tonight, you protected me too. Because everything you've done has been about making things right, not making yourself powerful. I'm far from perfect, Dominic warned. Good, Vera said. Perfect will be boring. I'll take complicated and real over perfect and fake any day. They left the parking garage together, hands intertwined, heading toward either triumph or disaster. Behind them, neither noticed the small device Vincent Corleone had placed under his seat. A recording device, still running, capturing one final conversation to insurance against whatever came next. Because Vincent Corleone was dying, but he wasn't stupid. And he'd learned a long time ago that in war, everyone needs leverage, even the dying. The board meeting started at 6 a.m. sharp, and by 6:03, Dominic knew they were in trouble. The Meridian conference room on the 45th floor was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a table of polished obsidian that reflected the faces of the 12 board members like a dark mirror. Dominic sat at one end, Vera beside him, the flash drive containing 16 years of buried truth in his pocket. Jordan sat at the opposite end, flanked by 2 attorneys, looking remarkably composed for a man who'd been outmaneuvered in a parking garage 4 hours ago. Too composed, Dominic thought. Something was wrong. Let's begin, Richard Morcerf said from his position at the table's midpoint. His face was carefully neutral, but Dominic caught the warning in his eyes. Mr. Ripley has called this emergency meeting to address serious allegations of corporate espionage and to seek ratification of the Patterson Industries acquisition. Mr. Ashford has requested time to present counter-evidence regarding Mr. Ripley's conduct. The board will hear both presentations before voting. Actually, Jordan said, his voice calm and reasonable, I'd like to address the counter-evidence first. Save everyone some time. Dominic's instinct screamed danger. That's not Mr. Ashford's evidence, Jordan continued, pulling out his own flash drive, comes from Vincent Corleone, who met with Mr. Ashford and Ms. Tully in a parking garage at 1:15 this morning. Mr. Corleone allegedly provided documentation proving various crimes, including, he paused for effect, murder charges against my late father. Murmurs around the table. Several board members looked shocked. Others looked skeptical. What Mr. Ashford hasn't disclosed, Jordan said, is that Vincent Corleone is currently under federal investigation for securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Charges that were filed, he checked his watch, approximately 2 hours ago. Dominic felt the floor drop out from under him. What? I'm sure you can understand my shock, Jordan continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. When I discovered that instead of accepting my evidence of your corporate espionage, you chose to conspire with a known criminal to fabricate evidence against me. Evidence that conveniently implicates my deceased father in crimes he cannot defend himself against. That's not what happened, Vera said sharply. Corleone came to us. After you illegally accessed my office, Jordan interrupted. After you stole confidential files. After you realized that your corporate espionage was caught on camera and you needed a way to discredit me before I could expose you. He shook his head sadly. It's actually quite clever. If you can't defend your own crimes, accuse your accuser of worse ones. One of the board members, Patricia Waterford, a steel-haired woman who'd built her fortune in pharmaceuticals, leaned forward. Mr. Ashford, is it true that you obtained evidence from a man currently facing federal charges? The timing of those charges is awfully convenient, Dominic said, his mind racing. Jordan filed them to discredit Corleone's testimony. I didn't file anything, Jordan said smoothly. The federal prosecutor's office filed charges based on evidence they've been gathering for months. I simply became aware of it and felt obligated to inform this board that you were consorting with criminals. He was lying. He had to be. But proving it in the next 5 minutes with a room full of skeptical board members was impossible. The evidence on this drive, Dominic said, pulling it out, proves that Jordan has been engaged in fraud, that he's accepting kickbacks, that he's deliberately structured the Patterson acquisition to benefit himself while destroying Meridian. Evidence obtained illegally. One of Jordan's attorneys interjected, from a criminal defendant who has every reason to lie. Evidence that would be inadmissible in any court of law and should be inadmissible in this boardroom. We're not a court, Vera argued. We don't need to follow evidentiary standards. We need to investigate credible allegations. From a VP who was caught on camera engaging in corporate espionage, Jordan's second attorney said, Ms. Tully, you're hardly an unbiased source. The room was turning against them. Dominic could feel it, the subtle shift in body language, the way board members wouldn't quite meet his eyes. Jordan had framed this perfectly. Everything Dominic and Vera said sounded like desperate criminals making excuses. I'd like to move for an immediate vote, Jordan said. First, to ratify the Patterson acquisition as planned. Second, to refer Ms. Tully and Mr. Ashford to law enforcement for prosecution. And third, to dilute the Ashford Trust holdings in Meridian to below 5%, removing their influence from company operations. That's 3 separate motions, Richard protested. They need to be discussed individually. The Ashford Trust's interference is a clear and present danger to this company, Jordan said. Every moment we delay gives them opportunity to cause more damage. I'm invoking Article 17 of the Corporate Charter, emergency action in the face of immediate threat to company viability. Richard's face went pale. Jordan, that article is for terrorist attacks or natural disasters, not internal disputes. An heir to a major shareholder committing espionage and conspiring with federal criminals sounds like an immediate threat to me, Patricia Waterford said. I second the motion for emergency action. No, Dominic thought. This couldn't be happening. They had evidence. They had proof. But Jordan had poisoned the well so thoroughly that no one would even look at it. All in favor of emergency protocols, Jordan said. 6 hands went up immediately. Then 7, 8. Richard didn't raise his hand. Neither did 2 others, younger board members, probably more willing to question authority. But 8 votes out of 12 was a majority. Emergency protocols are in effect, Jordan said, and his smile was triumphant. All motions will be voted on simultaneously. All in favor of ratifying the Patterson acquisition, referring Ms. Tully and Mr. Ashford for prosecution, and diluting the Ashford Trust holdings. This was it. The moment everything ended. Dominic looked at Vera, saw his own despair reflected in her eyes. For hours ago, they'd been kissing in a parking garage, high on victory and possibility. Now they were watching their careers, their reputations, possibly their freedom evaporate. The hand started to go up. Then the conference room door burst open. A woman in a dark suit strode in, FBI credentials held high. Behind her, 3 more agents. "This meeting is suspended," she announced. "Nobody move. Nobody leave." Jordan's confidence flickered. "What is this? You can't just interrupt a private board meeting." "I'm Special Agent Rebecca Conley, FBI White Collar Crimes Division," the woman said. "And I absolutely can interrupt when I have evidence of securities fraud being voted on in real time." She looked directly at Jordan. "Mr. Ripley, you're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit the same." The room erupted in chaos. Jordan shot to his feet. "This is insane. On what evidence?" "Evidence provided by Vincent Corleone as part of a cooperation agreement with the federal prosecutor's office," Agent Conley said. She pulled out a tablet, turning it to show the screen. "Mr. Corleone approached us 6 months ago when you first began blackmailing him. He's been working with us ever since, documenting every communication, every fraudulent scheme, every crime you've committed." Dominic's mind reeled. Vincent had been working with the FBI? For 6 months? "The flash drive he gave you last night," Agent Conley continued, looking at Dominic, "was a duplicate of evidence we already have. He was instructed to make contact with you because we needed a way to get Jordan to reveal himself, to get him to demonstrate his criminal intent on record." She pulled out her phone, playing audio. Jordan's voice from the parking garage. "I won't just expose your crimes. I'll implicate your daughter. I've already seeded documents." "That's extortion and witness tampering," Agent Conley said. "Federal crimes. Combined with the financial fraud, you're looking at 20 to 30 years, Mr. Ripley." Jordan's face had gone from red to white to gray. "I want my lawyer." "You have 2 of them right here," Agent Conley said pleasantly. "Though I should inform you that we're also investigating them for conspiracy. You might want to consider independent counsel." The attorneys stood up so fast their chairs fell over. "We had no knowledge of any criminal activity." "Save it for your own arraignment," Agent Conley said. She gestured to the other agents. "Cuff him." As federal agents moved toward Jordan, he looked across the table at Dominic. And for just a moment, the mask fell completely. No charm, no composure, just pure hatred. "This isn't over," he said. "My father built an empire. I'm not going down because some janitor got lucky." "Your father was a murderer," Dominic said quietly. "And you're exactly like him. The only difference is he got away with it." Jordan lunged across the table. He didn't make it far. Agents grabbed him, forcing him down, snapping handcuffs on. But in those few seconds of violence, something fell from his jacket pocket. A small recording device, still running. Agent Conley picked it up, examined it. Her expression hardened. "Well," she said, "that's interesting. Mr. Ripley, were you recording this board meeting?" "That's legal," one of the attorneys sputtered. "Single-party consent state. Except when the recording is being used to facilitate fraud," Agent Conley said. She looked at the board members, which raises questions about everyone in this room. Who knew about Mr. Ripley's schemes? Who benefited? Who looked the other way? The board members who'd voted for Jordan's motions suddenly looked very uncomfortable. "We'll need to interview each of you," Agent Conley continued. "Separately. Downtown. Today." Her smile was sharp. "I hope you all have excellent lawyers." Dominic should have felt victorious. Jordan was arrested. The fraud was exposed. The FBI had been involved all along, which meant the evidence was legitimate and admissible. They'd won. So why did he feel like everything was falling apart? Agent Conley turned to him and Vera. "Mr. Ashford, Ms. Tully, we'll need your statements as well. You're not under arrest. Mr. Corleone's testimony clears you of any criminal intent in accessing Mr. Ripley's office. But there are questions about what you knew and when." "Of course," Dominic said. Whatever you need. Good. My colleagues will escort you to Federal Plaza. Separately, please. Standard procedure for witness interviews. That's when it hit him. Separately. He looked at Vera, saw the same realization dawning on her face. They were about to be separated, interrogated, pulled into a federal investigation that could last months or years. Everything they'd started last night, the fragile beginning of something real, was about to be buried under depositions and legal proceedings. How long will this take? Vera asked. The interviews? A few hours each, probably. Agent Conley's expression softened slightly. The investigation? Could be 6 months before we go to trial. Maybe longer. During that time, you'll both be material witnesses, which means restricted contact, especially if we need to depose you separately. Restricted contact. Legal speak for. You can't see each other until this is over. That's not, Dominic started. Non-negotiable, Agent Conley said firmly. I understand you've been working together on this, but the defense will look for any sign of witness collusion. The best way to protect the case is to keep you separated until after testimony. Jordan was being let out now, still struggling against the handcuffs, still insisting this was all a mistake. The board members were calling their lawyers. The conference room had descended into controlled chaos. And in the middle of it all, Dominic and Vera stood on opposite sides of an invisible line that was about to become very, very real. I need a moment, Vera said to the agent, escorting her. Just one moment, please. The agent looked at Agent Conley, who nodded. 2 minutes. Then we go. Vera crossed to Dominic, her hand finding his. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. This is what we wanted, she said. Jordan arrested. The company saved. Justice for your father. I know, Dominic said. So why does it feel like we're losing? Because they were. Not the case, not the company, but something more important. That fragile connection they'd built in the parking garage in the early morning hours when the world narrowed to just the two of them. That was being taken away before they'd had a chance to see what it could become. 6 months, Dominic said. Maybe longer. And during that time, we can't see each other. Can't talk except through lawyers. Can't even text without it becoming evidence. Vera's voice cracked. God, the timing of this is the worst, Dominic finished. I know. I want to tell you to wait for me, Vera said. To promise that when this is over, we'll pick up where we left off. But 6 months is a long time. A year is longer. And you barely know me. The real me, not the corporate VP version. I know enough, Dominic said. Do you? Vera pulled her hand away, and the loss of contact felt like a physical wound. You know, 7 months of observations and 1 night of crisis. You don't know what I'm like on a random Tuesday. What I'm like when I'm scared or petty or wrong. You don't know if this, she gestured between them, is real or just adrenaline and proximity. She was giving him an out, Dominic realized. Protecting him, or maybe protecting herself, from the pain of hoping for something that might not survive the separation. Time's up, the agent said gently. Vera stepped back. Thank you, she said formally, for everything you did, for exposing Jordan, for proving that integrity still matters. She was retreating into professionalism, building walls, and Dominic didn't know how to stop her because everything she'd said was true. They barely knew each other. 1 night wasn't enough to build a foundation strong enough to survive months of forced separation and legal pressure. But God, he wanted it to be enough. Vera, don't, she whispered. Please don't make this harder than it already is. She left with her escort, not looking back. Dominic watched her go, feeling like he was 16 again, watching his father's casket being lowered into the ground and understanding that some losses couldn't be undone. His own escort, a younger agent with sympathetic eyes, touched his arm. Mr. Ashford? We should go. Yeah, Dominic said. Let's go. He followed the agent out of the conference room, down the elevator, into a waiting sedan. The city was waking up outside, people heading to work, to coffee shops, to normal lives where they didn't fall for someone just in time to lose them. His phone buzzed. A text from Richard Morcerf. The board is in chaos. 3 members are retaining criminal defense attorneys. 2 are trying to resign. Patterson Deal is dead. You did it. You saved the company. He should feel triumphant, vindicated. His grandmother would be proud. His father would be avenged. Instead, he just felt empty. Another text, this one from an unknown number. Mr. Ashford, this is Vincent Corleone. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about the FBI cooperation. They insisted on operational security. I hope you understand. Dominic typed back, I understand. Thank you for what you did. From my father. The response came quickly. Your father was a good man. You're like him in all the best ways. Take care of Miss Tully if you can. She reminds me of my daughter, brilliant and brave and too willing to sacrifice herself for others. I would if I could, Dominic wrote. But she's being smart, protecting herself. I can't blame her for that. My daughter used to say that being smart and being happy are sometimes opposite choices. Something to think about. The car pulled up to the federal building. Dominic pocketed his phone and followed the agent inside, into fluorescent-lit halls and conference rooms that smelled like bad coffee and legal documents. The interview lasted 6 hours. They asked about everything. How he'd gotten the janitor job, what he'd observed when he'd first suspected Jordan of crimes. They asked about Vera, about their relationship, about whether anything romantic had influenced his investigation. No, Dominic lied. Because the truth that he'd started falling for her somewhere between watching her mentor junior employees and seeing her stand up for him at the gala would complicate things, would make their testimonies look coordinated, would hurt the case. So he lied, and he hated himself for it. And he knew Vera was probably doing the same thing in another room, protecting the case by denying what was between them, choosing smart over happy. When they finally released him at 3 p.m., Dominic walked out in an afternoon sunshine feeling like he'd aged a decade. His phone showed 47 missed calls, reporters, probably, wanting comments on Jordan's arrest. 3 voicemails from his mother, worried after seeing the news. 2 from Richard, updating him on the board's emergency session. Nothing from Vera. He shouldn't have expected anything. But Hope was stubborn and stupid, and he'd been checking anyway. Dominic took a car service back to his actual home, a penthouse in the financial district he hadn't seen in 7 months, too busy maintaining his janitor cover. The doorman greeted him by name, and the familiar luxury felt alien after months of studio apartments and efficiency living. He poured a drink he didn't want and stood at the window watching the city. He'd won. Jordan was destroyed. The company was saved. His father's murder would finally be investigated properly. Everything he'd worked for had succeeded. So why did victory taste like ash? His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Ashford? A woman's voice, young and uncertain. This is Sarah Corleone, Vincent Corleone's daughter. Dominic's hand tightened on the phone. Is your father okay? He collapsed this afternoon. The stress of the testimony, the cancer, her voice broke. They don't think he has much time. Days, maybe. He's asking for you. Where? She gave him a hospital name. He said he needs to tell you something. About Ms. Tully. Something the FBI doesn't know. Cold dread flooded Dominic's veins. What about her? He wouldn't tell me. Said it had to be you. Please, Mr. Ashford. He's dying. If there's something he needs to say, I want him to have peace before. She couldn't finish. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Dominic said. He grabbed his jacket and ran. The hospital was in Brooklyn, a 40-minute drive that Dominic made in 25 by bribing the car service driver. He found Vincent Corleone's room on the oncology floor, Sarah waiting outside with red-rimmed eyes. Thank you for coming, she said. He's awake. Barely. Dominic entered the private room. Vincent looked like he'd aged a decade since the parking garage, skin gray, breathing labored, machines beeping quietly around him. But his eyes were sharp when they found Dominic. You came, Vincent rasped. Good. Don't have much time. Need to tell you. He coughed, pain spasming across his face. Don't push yourself, Dominic said, moving to the bedside. Whatever it is, it can wait. No. Vincent's hand shot out, grabbing Dominic's wrist with surprising strength. Can't wait. It's about Vera. About why Jordan really hates her. Dominic's blood turned to ice. What do you mean? Jordan's father, Michael Ripley. He didn't just kill your father. Vincent's voice was barely a whisper. There was someone else. Another executive who discovered the scheme. A man named David Tully. The name hit Dominic like a freight train. Tully. Vera's last name. No, he breathed. Vera's father, Vincent, confirmed. He worked in the Ashford Trust's legal department. He found evidence of Michael's fraud, was going to testify alongside your father. Michael poisoned them both. Your father died. David Tully survived, barely. Brain damage from oxygen deprivation during his heart attack. He's been in a care facility for 16 years. The room spun. Vera never mentioned. Because she doesn't know the truth, Vincent said. She thinks her father's condition was natural. Bad genetics. The family kept it quiet, didn't want publicity. But I knew. Michael told me, years later, when he was drunk and guilty and dying himself. He said, Vincent's breathing rattled. He said he regretted your father, but not David, because David lived, and living as a vegetable was worse than death. He was proud of that. Dominic felt sick. Does Vera know any of this? Not unless you tell her. And here's the thing. Vincent's grip tightened. Jordan knows. Michael told him before he died. Jordan knows that Vera's father was collateral damage in his father's crimes. And he hired her anyway. Why? Because he's exactly like his father, Vincent said. Cruel. Wants to keep his victims close. Gets off on knowing he has power over the daughter of a man his father destroyed. His eyes were desperate now. You have to tell her. She deserves to know. But the FBI, they don't have this evidence. It's not in the case. It's just my word, and I'm dying, and without corroboration. It's he said, she said, Dominic finished. They won't investigate. Not unless you push them. Not unless you make them. Vincent's breathing was getting worse. Promise me. Promise you'll tell her. Promise you'll get her justice too. I promise, Dominic said. Vincent's grip loosened. He slumped back against the pillows, something like peace crossing his features. Good. That's good. I can rest now. His eyes closed. The machines began to alarm. Nurses rushed in. Sarah was crying in the hallway. Vincent Corleone died at 4:47 p.m., with Dominic standing there holding a truth that would destroy Vera all over again. Dominic stood in the hallway, numb, as doctors pronounced time of death, and Sarah sobbed against her mother's shoulder. He should leave. Should give them privacy. Should call someone, Richard, his lawyer, the FBI. Should call Vera. But he was restricted from contact. And even if he wasn't, what would he say? Hey, remember how we were falling for each other? Turns out our fathers were killed by the same man, and the CEO we just destroyed has been psychologically torturing you for 3 years because of it. Fun times. His phone rang. Agent Conley. Mr. Ashford, I just heard about Vincent Corleone. I'm sorry for your loss. He wasn't. We weren't. Dominic couldn't finish the sentence. He told you something, Agent Conley said. It wasn't a question. Before he died. Something about the case. How did you? Because dying witnesses always do. And you have a tell. Your voice gets quiet when you're processing something devastating. She paused. Whatever he told you, I need to know. For the investigation. Dominic closed his eyes. Saw Vera's face as she'd walked away from him in the conference room. Saw her building walls, protecting herself, choosing smart over happy. If he told Agent Conley about Vera's father, it would expand the investigation. Add months, maybe years to the case. Keep them separated even longer. And for what? Justice for a crime 16 years old with no living witnesses except Dominic's word about what a dead man confessed? Or he could stay silent. Let the case proceed as planned. Get over with in 6 months. Have a chance, however slim, of seeing where things could go with Vera once they were free. Choose smart over happy. Or choose Vera over everything else. Mr. Ashford? Agent Conley prompted. Dominic opened his eyes. He told me about his daughter, he lied. How grateful he was that Jordan's threats against her were exposed. How he hoped she'd be okay after he was gone. A pause. Agent Conley didn't believe him. But she also couldn't prove otherwise. That's all, she asked. That's all. Mr. Ashford, if you're withholding evidence. I'm not, Dominic said. And technically it was true. He had no evidence. Just a dying man's confession about crimes no one could prove. Okay, Agent Conley said slowly. We'll be in touch about trial preparation. In the meantime, remember, no contact with Ms. Tully or any other witnesses. Understood. He hung up and stood there in the hospital hallway, holding a secret that would change everything with no idea what to do with it. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Vera. I know we're not supposed to have contact. I know this is dangerous and stupid and could compromise the case. But I just heard about Vincent Corleone, and I needed to tell you I'm sorry. I know he meant something to you. I know you're probably alone right now, and I wish I could be there with you. I wish things were different. I wish." The message cuts off. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, "I wish I'd been braver this morning. I wish I hadn't walked away. I wish I'd told you that one night was enough. That I don't need a random Tuesday to know what I feel. That I'm terrified and certain in equal measure, and I hate that we're losing time we can't get back. But we're doing the right thing. We're protecting the case. We're being smart. I just wanted you to know that smart feels terrible. And if you decide 6 months is too long to wait for someone you barely know, I'll understand. But I'll also regret it for the rest of my life. Be well, Dominic Ashford. You're exactly the kind of good the world needs more of." Dominic stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed, "Vera, there's something you need to know about your father." His thumb hovered over the send button. One click, and he'd tell her everything. Destroy her world all over again. Extend the investigation. Lose any chance they had of salvaging what was between them. One click, and he'd choose justice over happiness. Truth over love. What would his grandmother tell him to do? What would his father do? Dominic closed his eyes, thought about everything he'd learned in 7 months of being invisible. About the difference between power and strength. About integrity and sacrifice. About the cost of doing what was right versus what was easy. He deleted the message. Typed instead, 6 months isn't too long. A year isn't too long. However long this takes, I'll wait. Because one night was enough for me too. And when this is over, we'll have all the random Tuesdays we want. Be well, Vera Tully. The world needs more of you too." He sent it. Then he turned off his phone, walked out of the hospital, and went home to begin the longest wait of his life. Knowing that when Vera finally learned the truth about her father, she might never forgive him for keeping it from her. But at least she'd be free of the investigation, free of the legal battles, free to move forward with her life, even if that life didn't include him. It was the most selfless thing he'd ever done. It felt like dying. 5 months and 17 days. That's how long Dominic lasted before he broke. Not dramatically, not with some grand gesture. Just a quiet Monday morning in November when he woke up in his penthouse, made coffee he didn't taste, and realized he couldn't carry the weight of his secret another day. The federal case against Jordan Ripley was proceeding smoothly. Too smoothly, actually. Jordan had taken a plea deal, 15 years in federal prison in exchange for testimony against other executives involved in similar schemes. The Patterson acquisition had been unwound, Meridian stock had recovered, and the board had unanimously voted to install Vera as CEO. Everything had worked out perfectly, except Dominic hadn't spoken to Vera in 157 days. Hadn't seen her except in news coverage of her corporate reforms at Meridian. Hadn't touched her since that moment in the conference room when she'd walked away to protect them both. And every day, the secret about her father grew heavier. He'd try to justify his silence. Told himself he was protecting her. That knowing the truth would only hurt her without changing anything. That her father's condition wouldn't improve just because she knew how it happened. But the real truth, the one he finally admitted to himself at 6 a.m. on that Monday morning, was that he'd been protecting himself, protecting the possibility of a future with her. And in doing so, he'd become exactly what he'd spent 7 months fighting against. Someone who chose convenience over integrity. Dominic picked up his phone and called Richard Morcerf. "It's early," Richard grumbled. "This better be important. I need you to arrange a meeting with Vera," Dominic said. "Today, if possible." A pause. "Dominic, the trial is in 3 weeks." Agent Conley specifically said, "I know what you said. I need to see Vera anyway. There's something I should have told her 5 months ago." His voice was steady despite the fear flooding his system. "Something that might make her hate me. But she deserves to know." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "This is about Vincent Corleone's deathbed confession, isn't it? The one you told Agent Conley was nothing important." Dominic's breath caught. "How did you? I've known you since you were 12 years old," Richard said. "You think I can't tell when you're carrying guilt? You've been different since that day. Quieter. like you're waiting for a bomb to go off. Another pause. What did Vincent really tell you? So Dominic told him. All of it. David Tully, the poisoning, Michael Ripley's cruel pride at leaving a man alive but broken. Jordan's psychological torture of Vera for 3 years, knowing her father was a victim of his own father's crimes. When he finished, Richard exhaled slowly. Jesus, Dominic, you've been sitting on this for 5 months. I thought I was protecting her. You were protecting yourself, Richard said, not unkindly. From losing her. I understand that. But she's going to be furious when she finds out. I know. She might never forgive you. I know that too. Dominic closed his eyes. But my grandmother used to say that love without honesty is just a beautiful lie. And I'm done lying. Even if the truth costs you everything. Especially then. Richard sighed. I'll make the call. But Dominic, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Finally, the meeting was set for 2 p.m. at a neutral location. A private room in a law office where attorney-client privilege would keep their conversation protected from FBI oversight. A legal gray area that Richard had negotiated with lawyerly precision. Dominic arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time pacing, rehearsing words that all sounded inadequate. How do you tell someone that you've been hiding the truth about their father's near death? That you chose your own happiness over their right to know? At 2:03, the door opened. Vera walked in, and Dominic forgot how to breathe. 5 months had changed her. Her hair was shorter, cut to her shoulders in a style that was both professional and softer than before. She wore a charcoal suit that screamed CEO, but there were shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. She looked powerful and exhausted, and so beautiful that Dominic's chest ached. Dominic, she said, and her voice was carefully neutral. Richard said you needed to see me urgently. Is something wrong with the case? No, the case is fine. He gestured to the chairs. Can we sit? She hesitated, then nodded. They sat across from each other at a small conference table, the distance between them feeling vast. You look good, Dominic said, then immediately felt stupid. I mean, I saw you on the news. The reforms you're implementing at Meridian, the new ethics board, the whistleblower protections, it's everything you wanted to do. Everything I fought Jordan for 3 years, Vera agreed. Turns out, when the CEO actually wants to do the right thing, boards are surprisingly cooperative. A small, sad smile. You were right about me being ready for the position. I just wish you'd been there to see it. I wanted to be, Dominic said. Every day, every news article, every announcement. I wanted to call you, congratulate you, just hear your voice. But you didn't. There was no accusation in her tone, just fact. Because we agreed. Because we were being smart. About that, Dominic took a breath. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you 5 months ago, but I was too much of a coward. And when I tell you, you're probably going to hate me. You'll definitely never trust me again. But you deserve to know the truth, even if it destroys any chance we ever had. Vera's expression shifted from neutral to concerned. Dominic, you're scaring me. What is this about? Your father, Dominic said. David Tully. The color drained from Vera's face. What about him? So Dominic told her. Vincent's deathbed confession. Michael Ripley poisoning both their fathers. Her father's brain damage being deliberate, not natural. Jordan knowing all of it and hiring her anyway, torturing her with proximity to her father's destroyer's legacy. He told her everything, his voice steady even as he watched her face cycle through shock, disbelief, horror, and finally, a cold fury he'd never seen before. When he finished, silence filled the room like a physical presence. How long have you known this? Vera finally asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Vincent told me the day he died. 5 months and 17 days ago. And you didn't think I had a right to know? You didn't think I should be informed that Jordan Ripley was psychologically torturing me for 3 years because his father destroyed mine? I thought I was protecting you, Dominic said. I thought. You thought wrong. Vera stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You had no right to make that choice for me. No right to decide what I could or couldn't handle. No right to sit on information about my own father for 5 months while her voice broke. While I fell asleep every night wondering if I was crazy for missing someone I'd only known for one night. Vera, Is that why you waited? She demanded. Because you wanted to see if we still had a chance before you risked it with the truth? Were you hedging your bets, Dominic? No, he said, standing to face her. I was being a coward. You're right. I had no right to keep this from you. I told myself I was protecting you, but really, I was protecting myself from losing you. And in the process, I became exactly what I despised, someone who lies to protect their own interests. At least you're honest about it now, Vera said bitterly. 5 months too late, but honest. She turned toward the door. Dominic's heart plummeted. This was it, the moment he lost her for good. Wait, he said. Please. There's more. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. More? What else could there possibly be? Vincent said there was no evidence. No way to prove what Michael Ripley did to our fathers. Just his word, and he's dead now. Dominic pulled out a folder from his briefcase. But I couldn't accept that. So I've spent the last 5 months looking, investigating, calling in every favor I had. He laid the folder on the table, opened it to show medical records, toxicology reports, financial statements. Your father's original hospital records from 16 years ago, Dominic said. I had independent toxicologists review them. The symptoms were consistent with digitalis poisoning, but no one tested for it at the time because his family history suggested natural cardiac issues. Vera moved closer, drawn despite her anger. Michael Ripley's financial records from the same period, Dominic continued. There's a payment to a pharmaceutical company, ostensibly for a charitable donation. But the company specialized in cardiac medications, including digitalis. And the donation came 2 weeks before my father's death. That's circumstantial, Vera said, but her voice had lost its edge. She was reading the documents now, her analytical mind engaging despite her emotions. It is, Dominic agreed, but there's more. I found a coroner who signed off on my father's death certificate. He's retired now, living in Florida, with a vacation home he bought 6 months after my father died. A vacation home that cost 3 times his annual salary. Michael Ripley paid him off. That's my theory. I hired a forensic accountant to trace the money. It's buried under shell companies and offshore accounts, but there's a trail, and that trail leads back to Michael Ripley. Dominic pulled out another document. The same coroner also signed off on your father's case. Ruled the brain damage as natural consequence of cardiac arrest, despite the fact that your father received CPR within 90 seconds. That should have prevented significant oxygen deprivation. Vera's hand trembled as she picked up the report. Unless the damage was already happening. Unless the poison was already in his system, causing cellular death that CPR couldn't prevent. Exactly. Dominic moved to stand beside her, close enough to touch but not touching. I've been compiling this for months. I have testimony from former Ashford Trust employees who remember your father and mine working together. Communications that suggest they were investigating the same fraud scheme. Enough to reopen both cases as potential homicides. What? Vera asked, looking up at him. Tears tracked down her face, but her eyes were fierce. Why go to all this trouble? You already had your justice. Jordan's in prison. The fraud was exposed. Why spend 5 months investigating something you could have just let die with Vincent? Because you deserve justice too, Dominic said simply. Because your father deserved to have the truth known. Because I couldn't stand the idea of you never knowing what really happened to him. He paused. And because I love you. The words fell into the space between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Vera stared at him. You love me. I love you, Dominic confirmed. I've loved you since I watched you fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Since you stood up to Jordan at that gala when no one else would. Since you risked everything to help me expose the truth, even knowing it might destroy your career. He took a shaky breath. I love you, and I know I don't deserve you. I know I betrayed your trust by keeping Vincent's confession secret. But I needed you to know that everything I did, the investigation, the documentation, all of it, was because I love you too much to let your father's story end as a footnote to someone else's crime. Vera was crying openly now. You're an idiot. I know. You should have told me immediately. The day Vincent died. Even if it hurt. Even if it was hard. I know. I've been visiting my father every Sunday for 16 years, Vera said, her voice breaking. sitting with a man who doesn't recognize me, who can't speak or move or show any sign that he knows I'm there. And the whole time, I thought it was just bad luck. Genetics. Something random and meaningless. Her hands fisted in Dominic's shirt. I had a right to know it was murder. I had a right to be angry at the right people. You did, Dominic agreed. And I stole that from you. I'm so sorry, Vera. I'm so sorry. She hit his chest. Not hard, just a frustrated gesture of pain and rage and grief. I hate you for lying to me. I know. I hate that you made this choice without me. I know. And I hate that I still love you anyway. The words came out as a sob. I hate that 5 months apart didn't change how I feel. I hate that even angry and hurt and betrayed, all I want to do is... She kissed him, hard and desperate, and full of 5 months of longing and loss. Dominic kissed her back, his hands in her hair, pulling her closer, tasting salt from her tears, and feeling like he could finally breathe again after months of suffocating. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Vera pressed her forehead to his. We're terrible at being smart, she whispered. The worst, Dominic agreed. And this doesn't mean I forgive you. Not completely. You're going to have to earn that back. I will, however long it takes. Good. She pulled back to look at him. Now tell me about this evidence. All of it. Every detail. Because if we're going to reopen these cases, if we're going to go after Michael Ripley's legacy, even though he's dead, I want to know exactly what we're working with. They spent the next 3 hours going through everything Dominic had compiled. Vera's brilliant legal mind found connections he'd missed, asked questions that sharpened their understanding, identified what would hold up in court versus what was purely circumstantial. Somewhere around hour 2, their hands found each other across the table and didn't let go. By hour 3, they had a plan. We take this to Agent Conley, Vera said. She reopens the investigation into both our Father's deaths. The evidence might not be enough for a criminal trial against a dead man, but it's enough to establish truth. To get on the record that Michael Ripley was a murderer. And Jordan? Dominic asked. Jordan knew, Vera said, her voice hardening. He knew what his father did to mine, and he hired me anyway. Tormented me for 3 years. That's not illegal, but it's relevant to his sentencing. Proof of his character, of exactly who he is. Agent Conley said the sentencing hearing is in 3 weeks. Dominic said, if we present this evidence, show the pattern of Ripley family cruelty. Jordan's plea deal gets revisited, Vera finished. 15 years becomes 25, maybe 30. She squeezed his hand. It's not enough. Nothing will ever be enough for what they did to our fathers. But it's something. It's justice, Dominic said. The real kind. Not just legal consequences, but truth acknowledged. Vera's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and sighed. Board meeting in an hour. New CEO problems. Turns out running an ethical company requires a lot of meetings about ethics. Sounds terrible, Dominic said, smiling. It's actually wonderful. She stood, gathering her things. Then paused. Dominic? What happens after the trial? After Jordan is sentenced and our Father's cases are reopened and all of this is finally over? What do you want to happen? He asked carefully. Vera came around the table, cupped his face in her hands. I want random Tuesdays. I want to learn what you're like when you're not saving companies or exposing fraud. I want to introduce you to my father, even though he won't know who you are, because I think he'd like knowing I found someone who fights for truth the way he did. Her thumb traced his cheekbone. I want a chance to be happy with you. Is that possible? After everything? I don't know, Dominic said honestly. I lied to you, betrayed your trust. That's not something that just disappears because we want it to. No, Vera agreed. But it's something we could work through. If we both choose to. If we both commit to honesty, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I can do that, Dominic said. I want to do that. Then we'll try, Vera said. After the trial. After the sentencing. After we've done right by our fathers. We'll try. She kissed him again, softer this time. A promise instead of a desperate reunion. I have to go, she murmured against his lips. I know, but I'll call you tonight. We're allowed to talk now. The investigation is basically over. Agent Conley can't stop us from having contact anymore. I'll be waiting. Vera gathered the evidence folder, her expression determined. We're going to bury him, Dominic. Jordan and his father's legacy. We're going to make sure everyone knows what the Ripley family really was. Together, Dominic said. Together, she confirmed. She left, and Dominic sat in the conference room for a long time afterward, feeling lighter than he had in months. He'd told the truth. Vera was furious, hurt, betrayed, but she was also still there, still willing to fight alongside him, still willing to try. His phone rang. Agent Conley. Mr. Ashford, she said. I just received a very interesting call from Vera Tully. She says you have new evidence regarding historical crimes connected to the Ripley case. Evidence you've been sitting on for 5 months. I do, Dominic confirmed. And I'm sorry I didn't bring it to you immediately. I was protecting someone you care about from painful truth, Agent Conley finished. I get it. It was still obstruction, and we'll need to discuss that. But first, I want to see this evidence. My office, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Bring everything. I'll be there. And Dominic? Whatever you and Miss Tully have going, I hope it works out. You both deserve some happiness after all this. The call ended. Dominic stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out into the November afternoon. The city was alive with people rushing to appointments, to homes, to lives that didn't involve corporate fraud and family murder and impossible romance. He pulled out his phone and texted Vera. For the record, I love you too. Just in case that wasn't clear. Her response came 30 seconds later. It was clear, but say it again anyway. I love you, Vera Tully. CEO, brilliant legal mind, woman who fights for justice even when it costs her everything. I love you too, Dominic Ashford. Former janitor, billionaire heir, man who spent 5 months investigating a dead man's crimes because his daughter deserved the truth. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Dominic smiled at his phone, at the question that held so much hope and fear. Yeah, he typed back. I think we are. 3 weeks until the trial. 3 weeks to build their case, prepare their testimony, make sure Jordan Ripley and his father's legacy were exposed completely. 3 weeks until they could finally stop fighting and start living. Dominic went home, made dinner for the first time in months, and actually tasted the food. Tomorrow, they'd go to war one final time. Tonight, he'd let himself hope. And that, he thought, was what his grandmother had meant all along. That justice without hope was just revenge. That truth without love was just fact. That the point of fighting the darkness was to make sure there was still light worth protecting when the battle ended. Vera called at 8 p.m., and they talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. About her father's care facility and his grandmother's favorite flowers. About Meridian's new initiatives and the book he'd been reading. About random Tuesdays and impossible futures and the terrifying, wonderful possibility of trying. When they finally hung up, Dominic fell asleep smiling for the first time in 157 days. The turning point had come. Now came the fight to make it matter. The federal courthouse in Manhattan was built to intimidate. Marble columns, vaulted ceilings, and the kind of architectural weight that reminded everyone who entered that justice was serious business. Dominic stood on the steps with Vera on the morning of Jordan Ripley's sentencing hearing, watching news crews set up cameras and reporters jostle for position. 3 weeks had passed since their meeting in the law office. 3 weeks of working with Agent Conley, of compiling evidence, of preparing testimony that would reopen wounds 16 years old. 3 weeks of late-night phone calls and stolen lunches, of slowly rebuilding trust and learning each other outside a crisis. Ready? Vera asked. She wore a navy suit that was all business, but her hand found his and held tight. No, Dominic admitted. You, not even a little bit. She squeezed his fingers. Let's do it anyway. They climbed the steps together, past reporters shouting questions they didn't answer, through security, into a courtroom already packed with spectators. Jordan's sentencing had drawn attention. Disgraced billionaire CEO facing federal prison was the kind of story that sold papers and drove clicks. But most of the people in attendance didn't know about the new evidence. Didn't know that today would be about more than Jordan's crimes. It would be about his father's legacy and 2 families who'd been destroyed by Ripley arrogance. Jordan was already seated at the defense table with his new attorney, a different lawyer after his previous counsel had been implicated in the fraud. He looked thinner than he had 5 months ago, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose, his hair less perfectly styled. Prison awaiting sentencing had not been kind to him. When he saw Dominic and Vera enter together, his expression hardened into something ugly. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Elizabeth Stratton presiding. The judge was a black woman in her 60s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen every kind of criminal defense attorney trick. She'd built her reputation on fairness and a complete intolerance for manipulation. Dominic had never been more grateful for a random judicial assignment. "Be seated," Judge Stratton said. "We're here for sentencing in the matter of United States versus Jordan Ripley. Mr. Ripley has entered a guilty plea to multiple counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. The plea agreement recommends 15 years in federal prison." She looked over her reading glasses. "However, I've received a motion from the prosecution to introduce new evidence relevant to sentencing. Ms. Conley, you may proceed." Agent Conley stood. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd become something like an ally. Professional, thorough, and genuinely outraged by what Michael Ripley had done. "Your Honor, the government has uncovered evidence of crimes committed by the defendant's father, Michael Ripley, 16 years ago. While Michael Ripley is deceased and cannot be prosecuted, his crimes are directly relevant to understanding the defendant's character and the appropriate sentence in this case." Jordan's attorney shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. My client is not responsible for his father's alleged actions." "Alleged?" Vera stood, her voice cutting. "Your Honor, I request permission to address the court." Judge Stratton studied her. "You're Vera Tully, CEO of Meridian Technologies and one of the victims of Mr. Ripley's fraud." "Yes, Your Honor, but I'm also the daughter of David Tully, one of the victims of Michael Ripley's crimes. I have standing to speak to how those crimes connect to the defendant's actions." "Objection," Jordan's attorney said. "This is a sentencing hearing, not a trial for crimes allegedly committed by a dead man." "Overruled," Judge Stratton said. "I'll allow it. Ms. Tully, you may speak. But be aware that I'll only consider evidence directly relevant to the defendant's sentencing." Vera walked to the podium, and Dominic watched her transform. This was CEO Vera, the woman who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals. But there was something else, too, a daughter seeking justice for a father who couldn't speak for himself. "Your Honor, 16 years ago, my father David Tully was a corporate attorney working for the Ashford Trust. He discovered evidence of a massive fraud scheme orchestrated by Michael Ripley, who was then an executive at several companies the trust had invested in. My father, along with Dominic Ashford's father Theodore, planned to testify to federal regulators." She pulled out documents, handing copies to the judge and the prosecution. Before they could testify, both men suffered sudden cardiac arrests. Theodore Ashford died. My father survived, but with severe brain damage that left him in a vegetative state. For 16 years, I believe this was a tragic medical coincidence. Her voice didn't waver, but Dominic could see her knuckles white where she gripped the podium. 3 weeks ago, we obtained evidence that both men were poisoned with digitalis by Michael Ripley. The poisoning was designed to mimic natural heart conditions. The coroner who signed off on both cases was paid off to prevent investigation. She looked directly at Jordan. "And the defendant knew all of this when he hired me 3 years ago." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Stratton's gavel came down hard. "Order. Ms. Tully, you're alleging that Mr. Ripley hired you knowing his father had effectively murdered yours." "I'm stating it as fact, Your Honor. We have emails between the defendant and his father, sent before Michael Ripley's death 5 years ago. Michael told Jordan about the poisonings, bragged about them, and Jordan's response was she pulled out a printed email, her voice shaking now with rage. His response was, 'Dad, that's savage. Respect.'" The murmurs turned to gasps. Even Judge Stratton looked shocked. "The defendant then specifically sought to hire me," Vera continued. "Overruled his board's objections, brought me into Meridian knowing I was the daughter of a man his father had destroyed. And for 3 years, he systematically undermined my work, questioned my competence, and created a hostile work environment, all while enjoying, the fact that I had no idea why he targeted me. Your Honor, this is character assassination, Jordan's attorney started. It's truth, Dominic said, standing. Your Honor, I'm Dominic Ashford. Theodore Ashford was my father. I have corroborating evidence of everything Ms. Tully just said, including testimony from Vincent Corleone, given before his death, confirming Michael Ripley's crimes. He approached the bench with his own folder. We also have financial records showing Michael Ripley paid the coroner, pharmaceutical company receipts for Digitalis purchases, and communications between Michael and Jordan Ripley discussing the murders. Judge Stratton took the documents, reading in silence. The courtroom was so quiet Dominic could hear his own heartbeat. Finally, the judge looked up. Mr. Ripley, do you have anything to say to these allegations? Jordan stood slowly. His attorney grabbed his arm, whispering urgently, but Jordan shook him off. My father was a great man, Jordan said, his voice steady. He built an empire from nothing. Did he make enemies? Sure. Did some people suffer because of his success? Maybe, but that's business. That's how the world works. The strong survive and the weak make excuses. The sheer arrogance of it took Dominic's breath away. No remorse, no acknowledgement, just the same entitled worldview that had led Jordan to humiliate a janitor at a corporate gala. As for hiring Ms. Tully, Jordan continued, I hired the best person for the job. If she couldn't handle the pressure of a competitive environment, that's not my fault. If her father couldn't handle the stress of high-stakes corporate work, that's not my father's fault. He smiled, and it was poison. And if you want to blame me for my father's actions, go ahead. But legally you can't. I didn't poison anyone. I didn't kill anyone. I'm only responsible for my own crimes, not his. He was right, legally. And he knew it. The smug confidence on his face said he thought he'd won. Judge Stratton set down the documents. Mr. Ripley, you're correct that you cannot be held legally responsible for your father's crimes. However, you're responsible for your own character, for your own choices, for the cruelty you've demonstrated not just in your fraud, but in your treatment of Ms. Tully. She looked at Vera. Ms. Tully, I cannot prosecute a dead man, but I can ensure that the truth about Michael Ripley becomes part of the official record. I'm ordering these documents sealed as evidence, and I'm recommending that the Justice Department review the cases of both Theodore Ashford and David Tully for possible posthumous investigation of Michael Ripley. Your Honor, Vera said quietly. Thank you. That's all my father and I could ask for. Truth acknowledged. Judge Stratton nodded, then turned to Jordan. Her expression was granite. As for you, Mr. Ripley, your plea agreement recommended 15 years. Having heard this evidence, having seen your complete lack of remorse, your contempt for the people you've harmed, I'm rejecting that recommendation. Jordan's confidence faltered. You can't. The plea agreement. The agreement was a recommendation, not a requirement, Judge Stratton said. And I'm the one who decides your sentence. Based on the severity of your crimes, the pattern of cruelty demonstrated across your lifetime, and your clear indication that you would reoffend if given the opportunity, I sentence you to the maximum allowed under federal guidelines. She looked down at her papers. 30 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 25 years. Additionally, all assets connected to your criminal enterprises are to be seized and distributed to victims of your fraud. You will have no access to family wealth during your incarceration. You will experience the consequences of your actions without the buffer of money or privilege. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. Jordan's face went white. No, you can't do this. I have rights. I have. You have exactly what the law affords you, Judge Stratton said, which is more than your father gave to Theodore Ashford and David Tully. Marshals, remove the defendant. Federal marshals moved to take Jordan away. As they led him past Dominic and Vera, he stopped, his face twisted with hate. This isn't over, he hissed. My family has connections. Lawyers. I'll appeal. You'll spend the next 30 years in a cell, Dominic said quietly, learning what it feels like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of people who don't care about your name or your money or who your father was. He leaned closer. You humiliated me because I was dressed as a janitor. Because you thought poverty made me less than human. Now you'll spend 3 decades being treated exactly the way you treated everyone you considered beneath you. Seems fair. Jordan lunged, but the marshals held him back. You self-righteous. You think you're better than me? You're exactly the same. Rich kid playing dress-up, pretending to understand real people. The difference, Vera said, her voice ice, is that Dominic learned empathy. You never did. And now you'll have 30 years to figure out why that matters. They dragged Jordan away, his shouts echoing in the marble hallway. The courtroom slowly emptied. Reporters rushed out to file stories. Spectators dispersed, already pulling out phones to share what they'd witnessed. Dominic and Vera stood together in the suddenly quiet space. We did it, Vera said. We actually did it. Your father got justice, Dominic said. So did mine. Not complete justice. Michael Ripley is dead. He'll never face a courtroom. No, Dominic agreed. But his legacy is destroyed. His son is in prison. His crimes are on record. And 2 families finally know the truth. He took her hand. Sometimes that's all justice can be. Truth acknowledged and consequences delivered to those still alive to face them. Agent calmly approached, her expression softer than Dominic had ever seen it. That was remarkable testimony from both of you. And for what it's worth, I'm going to personally make sure the Justice Department follows through on reviewing your father's cases. Michael Ripley's crimes deserve full investigation. Thank you, Vera said, for everything, for believing us, for fighting for truth, even when it was complicated. That's the job, Agent calmly said. The job done right, anyway. She paused. You 2 are free to go, by the way. The case is closed. The restrictions are lifted. You can finally, she smiled, live your lives. She left them alone in the courtroom. Dominic turned to Vera. So, we're free. We are, she confirmed. No more investigations. No more restrictions. No more reasons to wait. None, Vera agreed. Random Tuesdays, here we come, Dominic said, and she laughed, the first truly free sound he'd heard from her in months. They walked out of the courthouse together, into November sunshine and the flash of cameras. Reporters shouted questions. They ignored them all. At the bottom of the steps, a car was waiting. Not a service car. Dominic's personal vehicle, driven by someone Richard had arranged. Where to? Vera asked. There's somewhere I'd like to take you, Dominic said. If you're willing. Always, she said. They drove in comfortable silence through the city, out to the suburbs, to a care facility in Westchester that was surrounded by gardens and looked more like a luxury hotel than a medical center. This is where my father is, Vera said quietly as they pulled up. I know, Dominic said. I'd like to meet him, if that's okay. Vera's eyes filled with tears. Dominic, he won't know you're there. He doesn't even know I'm there. I know that too, Dominic said. But you know, and I want him to hear, even if he can't understand, that his daughter is the most remarkable woman I've ever met. That she fought for him. That she got him justice. That he raised someone who changes the world just by being in it. Vera kissed him then, there in the parking lot of her father's care facility, with tears streaming down her face and hope finally blooming in her chest. I love you, she whispered. God help me, I love you so much. I love you too, Dominic said. Today, and all the random Tuesdays to come. They went inside together, met with David Tully's nurses, who spoke warmly about their patient, entered a sun-filled room where a man in his early 60s sat in a wheelchair, his eyes distant, his body still. Vera took her father's hand. Hi, Dad. I brought someone to meet you. His name is Dominic. His father worked with you a long time ago. She told him everything. About Jordan's arrest. About the investigation. About Michael Ripley's crimes being exposed. About justice, finally, after 16 years. And Dominic stood there beside her, holding her free hand, being present for a moment that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. When I left an hour later, Vera was exhausted and lighter at the same time. Thank you, she said, for that, for coming with me. For, she couldn't finish. For being here, Dominic finished. I'll always be here, for the hard stuff and the easy stuff and all the random Tuesdays in between. His phone buzzed. A text from Richard, board meeting tomorrow. They want to discuss the Ashford Trust's future involvement with Meridian. Thought you should know. Dominic showed Vera the message. Sounds ominous. Or opportune, she said thoughtfully. What if we propose something different? Not the trust just as a passive investor, but as an active partner in making Meridian a model for ethical business practices. You want to work together? Dominic asked. Officially, I want to build something that matters, Vera said. A company where people like your grandmother's fears never come true. Where wealth doesn't corrupt because integrity is built into the foundation. Where janitors are treated with the same respect as CEOs. Dominic smiled. My grandmother would love that vision. Then let's make it happen, Vera said. Together, as partners in business, and she paused, and in life. If you want that. Is that a proposition, Ms. Tully? It's a promise, Mr. Ashford, that I'm all in, that I'm choosing us, that I'm done being smart at the expense of being happy. They stood on the steps of the care facility as the sun set over the gardens, two people who'd found each other in the middle of chaos and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage. All in, Dominic agreed. For business, for life, for everything. They drove back to the city as the lights came on, talking about the future, about Meridian's next initiatives, about visiting his mother, about random Tuesdays and important Mondays and lazy Sundays. About a life built on truth instead of lies, on partnership instead of power, on love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. The case was closed. The villain was defeated. Justice was served. Now came the best part, living the life they'd fought so hard to protect. And as they pulled up to Vera's apartment, as Dominic walked her to her door, as she invited him in for coffee that they both knew wasn't really about coffee. As they stood on the threshold of something new and terrifying and wonderful, they both knew that the Real story was just beginning. 6 months later, the annual Meridian Technologies Gala looked nothing like it had a year ago. For one thing, the guest list had changed. Gone were the self-congratulatory executives and their trophy dates. In their place, employees from every level of the company, community leaders, nonprofit partners, and families of the people who actually made Meridian run. The janitorial staff sat at tables with board members. The IT team laughed with the executive leadership. Sarah Cole, reinstated with back pay and a promotion, was deep in conversation with Richard Morsurf about ethical supply chain management. And at the center of it all, Dominic Ashford stood at a podium, looking out at a room that felt entirely different from the one where Jordan Ripley had tried to humiliate him. Thank you all for coming, he said, and the room quieted. A year ago, I stood in a room like this wearing a janitor's uniform. I was invisible to most of the people here, beneath notice, just part of the furniture. He found Vera in the crowd. She was seated at a table near the front, wearing a midnight blue dress that matched the one from that first night. A deliberate choice, she'd told him that morning, to honor how far they'd come. Tonight, I'm standing here as a partner in Meridian's transformation. But more importantly, I'm standing here as someone who learned that the measure of a person has nothing to do with what they wear or how much money they have. It has everything to do with how they treat people when no one important is watching. He gestured to the room. Everyone here is important. The people who clean our offices, the people who secure our buildings, the people who write our code and manage our projects and answer our phones. Every single person matters. And this company, Meridian 2.0, as we're calling it, is built on that principle. Applause filled the room, genuine and warm. I want to thank CEO Vera Tully. Dominic continued, and Vera stood to acknowledge the recognition. Over the past 6 months, she's transformed this company from the inside out. New ethics board, whistleblower protections, profit sharing for all employees, starting wages raised to living wages, promotion structures based on merit, not connections. More applause. Vera's reforms had been controversial with some board members, the ones who'd quietly resigned rather than face the new standards, but transformative for the company culture. But tonight isn't just about business, Dominic said. It's about remembering, about honoring people who fought for integrity and paid a terrible price. The lights dimmed. A screen lowered behind him, showing 2 photographs. Theodore Ashford and David Tully, both young, both smiling, both frozen in time before tragedy struck. These men discovered fraud. They were going to testify. They were murdered for choosing truth over convenience. Dominic's voice was steady despite the emotion. For 16 years, their families didn't know the full story. But now we do. And now their legacy lives on in every ethical choice this company makes. He looked at Vera again. David Tully's daughter is living proof that integrity runs in families. That the best revenge against those who tried to silence truth is to speak it louder. To build something better. Vera's eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling. And my father, Theodore Ashford, believed that wealth was a responsibility, not a right. That power should be used to protect, not exploit. Dominic paused. I spent 7 months as a janitor trying to understand if he was right. Trying to see if people with money could still see people without it. What I learned is that money doesn't make you good or evil. It just amplifies what's already there. He pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. The room went completely silent. Which brings me to something personal, Dominic said, stepping down from the podium. He walked to Vera's table, and she stood, her hand covering her mouth, tears streaming freely now. Vera Tully, he said, opening the box to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, with a blue stone that matched the necklace he still wore. You saw me when I was invisible. You fought for justice when it cost you everything. You chose truth, even when lies would have been easier. You're the strongest, most brilliant, most compassionate person I've ever met. He got down on one knee, and the room collectively gasped. I love you. I love your random Tuesdays and your important Mondays and the way you fall asleep during movies, but insist you were just resting your eyes. I love that you visit your father every Sunday and talk to him like he can hear every word. I love that you're changing the world one ethical decision at a time. Vera was openly sobbing now, but she was also laughing. Will you marry me? Dominic asked. Will you let me spend the rest of my life being worthy of you? You're already worthy, Vera said, dropping to her knees to meet him at eye level. You've always been worthy. And yes, I'll marry you. Yes to everything. They kissed as the room erupted in applause and cheers. Employees were crying. Richard Morcerf was wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. Even the stoic security guards were smiling. When they finally pulled apart, Vera laughed shakily. You proposed in front of 300 people. That's bold. I wanted everyone to know, Dominic said. I wanted witnesses. I wanted the world to see that this us is real and lasting and built on everything we fought for. I love you, Vera whispered. So much it terrifies me. Good, Dominic said. I'd be worried if I was the only one terrified. They stood together, and Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly because of course it did. He'd had Richard sneak one of her other rings months ago to get the sizing right. The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations and joy. Sarah Cole hugged them both and cried about good people getting good things. Richard gave a toast about watching Dominic grow from an idealistic boy into a man who actually changed the world. Employees shared stories about how the new Meridian had changed their lives. Better pay, better treatment, better hope. And through it all, Dominic and Vera stayed close, hands intertwined, building memories on top of trauma. Around 10 p.m., they slipped away from the celebration, took the elevator to the executive floor, the same floor where they'd once committed light felonies breaking into Jordan's office. Want to see something? Vera asked, leading him to what used to be Jordan's corner office. The space had been completely transformed. Gone were the ostentatious art and self-important photos. In their place, a community workspace. Comfortable chairs, collaborative tables, walls covered with employee suggestions and innovation ideas. I turned it into a think tank, Vera explained. Anyone in the company can book time here. Come up with ideas, work on passion projects, dream about what we could be. I wanted Jordan's throne room to become a democracy. It's perfect, Dominic said. There's one more thing. She led him to the windows, to the view Jordan had once used as proof of his superiority. Look, the city spread out before them, lights glittering like stars. But Vera was pointing at something specific, a building in the distance with Ashford Tully Foundation glowing on its side. What is that? Dominic asked. Your wedding present, Vera said. I bought the building 3 months ago. set up a foundation in both our fathers' names. It funds investigations into corporate fraud, provides legal support for whistleblowers, and offers scholarships for first-generation college students. She leaned into him. I thought they died fighting for truth. The least we can do is make sure others don't have to die for the same fight. Dominic couldn't speak, could only hold her as emotion overwhelmed him. My grandmother would have loved you so much, he finally managed. I wish I could have met her. She's here, Dominic said, touching the necklace he still wore. She's in every choice we make, every person we protect, every truth we tell instead of hiding. They stood at the window for a long time, watching the city, imagining the future. What do you think happens now? Vera asked. We've defeated the villain, saved the company, got justice for our fathers. What comes after the happy ending? Life, Dominic said. The real work of building something lasting. Marriage and mortgages and arguments about whose turn it is to do dishes. Try to run an ethical company in an unethical world. Having kids, maybe teaching them about their grandfathers. Growing old together. Sounds ordinary, Vera said. Sounds perfect, Dominic corrected. His phone buzzed. A message from the care facility where David Tully lived. Thought you'd want to know. David smiled today during Vera's voice message. First facial response in months. Probably just a muscle twitch, but the nurses thought it was meaningful. Dominic showed Vera the message. She read it and started crying again, the good kind of tears. He heard me, she whispered. Maybe he's been hearing me all along. Maybe he has, Dominic said. And maybe, wherever they are, both our fathers are watching this. Watching us build the world they try to create. Finishing what they started. You think they're proud? Vera asked. I think they're dancing, Dominic said. Celebrating that their kids found each other. That love and justice won. That the bad guys lost, and the good guys got their happy ending. Vera turned in his arms, her engagement ring catching the light. This is really happening, isn't it? We're really going to do this. Build a life together. Run a company together. Change the world together. We really are, Dominic confirmed. I'm going to be a terrible wife, Vera warned. I work too much. I'm terrible at cooking. I have nightmares about board meetings. I'm going to be a terrible husband, Dominic countered. I still randomly clean things because of my janitor months. I call my grandmother constantly. I cry during commercials with dogs. We're going to be a disaster, Vera said, smiling. The best kind of disaster, Dominic agreed. They kissed as the city lights sparkled below them, as their futures merged into one shared story, as everything they'd fought for crystallized into this perfect moment. 1 year ago, a billionaire CEO had tried to humiliate a black janitor at a corporate gala. 1 year ago, Dominic Ashford had stood in silence and let Jordan Ripley reveal exactly who he was. 1 year ago, a simple necklace had changed everything. And now Dominic stood in that same building with a woman he loved, wearing an engagement ring that promised forever, having built a company and a foundation and a future based on everything his grandmother had taught him about power and responsibility and love. If you've been with me through this entire journey, if you felt the injustice and the triumph, if you believed in love that survives chaos, if you're crying happy tears right now, leave me a comment. Tell me what this story meant to you. Tell me about times you've been underestimated and how you prove them wrong. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now.